Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Lettuce Head Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Becomes Dark Phoenix? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Tokyo burned. The fire swallowed steel and concrete, turning skyscrapers into pyres. Smoke choked the heavens, blotting out the stars. The night was black, but the flames offered a cruel imitation of daylight, a world awash in red and gold. Somewhere in the distance, the sharp cracks of gunfire and the thunder of collapsing buildings merged into an orchestra of war. It had been days since the final battle began. Millions had perished since the war's inception. And in war, death is the only currency. You pay with blood. And when there is nothing left to sacrifice, when every dream, every hope has been turned to ash, you are left with nothing but pain. Footsteps echoed through the rain-slick streets, faint beneath the carnage. A lone figure moved forward, his military coat heavy with soot and rain. His emerald eyes, one alive, the other dim, stared at the broken pavement beneath him, yet his mind was elsewhere. Memories clawed at him. The choices that had led him here. The moment the world turned its back on him. The moment he had turned his back on the world. The war had taken everything, but it had given him something in return. A cause. A fire in his chest that refused to die, even as Tokyo crumbled around him. A gust of wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it the scent of burning metal and blood. And then he felt it, another presence. He raised his head. There she was. Blonde hair danced in the storm. Her uniform, once pristine, was torn and dirted by battle. And her eyes, green like his, lifeless like his. They had been stripped of innocence long ago, carved into something cold and sharp by war. Izumi Yagi, a name once spoken in quiet halls, in whispered reverence. The daughter of All Might, the legacy of hope. And now his enemy. Lightning slashed the sky. The rain thickened, drowning out the fires but doing nothing to quell the storm between them. For a long moment, neither moved. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. Izuku reached for the weapon strapped to his back. With deliberate slowness, he drew the sword from its sheath. A relic of a different time, of a different war. Its steel gleamed dully beneath the fractured light. He raised it. He had seen this moment before. Had played it out in his mind 1,000 times. He had feared it. And yet, now that it was here, now that it was real, he was calm. He had long since made peace with the truth. The shadow is all that remains. It is the only thing that understands him, the only thing that does not judge him. He has fought it. He has tried to deny it. But in the end he embraces it. Because the shadow is not his enemy, it is his refuge. It is his fire. And in its depths he has found his name. Dark Phoenix. On the other side, Izumi did not falter. She raised her hands, stepping into a stance she had drilled into her bones since childhood. She was shaking, though whether from fear or conviction, she did not know. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were lost among the rain. The world had led them to this moment. A collision written in blood and fate. There was no turning back. One would rise. One would fall. And when the embers settled, the world would either be reforged in fire or drowned in the cold silence of its own mistakes. But that is how it always ends, isn't it? Not with a bang, but with a whimper. History will remember this moment. History will remember them. But the truth? The truth is never so simple. There are no heroes. There are no villains. There are only perspectives. Only lies we tell ourselves. Only the truths we refuse to see. Brother! Brother! A high-pitched, panicked voice rang through the garden. Brother, wake up. Please wake up. The voice belonged to a little girl, Izumi Yagi, all of 3 years old, her blonde hair bouncing with every frantic shake. Her tiny hands gripped the shoulders of the very unconscious Izuku Midoriya, who was sprawled dramatically under a tree like a fallen hero. Tears welled up in her wide, green eyes as she sniffled. Brother, this isn't funny. I'll tell Mom, and Dad, and Nana too. Izumi threatened, her lower lip wobbling as she shook him harder. And then, Finally, a groan. Izuku's eyes fluttered open, the left one scrunching up as he reached for his head. What hit me? He mumbled before suddenly being tackled into a hug, small arms squeezing him like a vice. You dumb. Izumi sobbed into his shoulder. Don't do that. I thought you were gonna die. Izuku blinked. Then, after a moment of processing, he chuckled sheepishly. Not dead, Izumi. You almost were, she shot back, pulling away just enough to give him a good glare, her nose all scrunched up. Izuku scratched the back of his head. Sorry for scaring you. I won't do it again, promise. Izumi pouted. You better not. The memory of what led to this mess clicked back into Izuku's brain. It had started like any normal day. Hero training, which was, in reality, 2 kids running around the garden with action figures while making loud explosion noises. But then fate struck. A small white kitten had appeared out of nowhere, scampered up a tree, and promptly gotten stuck. Izuku, ever the hero in the making, knew what had to be done. Fear not, Izumi. I'll save it, he declared, puffing out his chest like all might. Izumi, already sensing disaster, jumped up. Brother, wait. You could get hurt. Heroes always take risks. Izuku shot back, beginning his climb. Izumi stomped her tiny foot. At least let me help. Izuku looked down at her, sighing dramatically. Fine. Your job is very important, okay? Izumi perked up, eyes hopeful. Really? Yes. You will stand right there and catch the cat when I drop it. Her face fell. That's not helping, that's just waiting. Izuku was already too far up to argue. The kitten was perched at the very end of a branch, looking at him with pure, unfiltered judgment. Izuku grinned, imitating his hero's booming voice. Do not worry, little one. Because I am here. The kitten hissed. Okay, no need for dramatics. Izuku mumbled, reaching out carefully. The kitten eyed him, twitching its tiny tail. For a moment, it seemed like Izuku had won it over. He grabbed it gently. Got you. Victory. Izuku beamed, looking down. Izumi. Catch. Wait, what? Too late. The kitten fell, shrieking in betrayal, and Izumi let out a panicked eek before barely managing to catch it. She stared at it in shock as it blinked up at her, stunned. Then it wriggled out of her arms, hopped onto the grass, and scampered away like nothing had happened. Izumi gawked. Wow. Rude. She turned back up. Okay, your turn. Get down. Right. Izuku began climbing down, humming to himself. Everything was going great until, snap. His foot slipped. His grip failed. The branch gave out. Oh no. Izuku dash. Gravity did the rest. Back in the present, Izuku groaned again, still rubbing his sore head. I really need to stop climbing things. Yeah, no kidding. Izumi huffed, crossing her arms. Kids, are you all right? They both jumped and turned. Izuku Midoriya, their mother, stood at the door, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. Izuku and Izumi exchanged a look. Cue sheepish grins. We were just playing, Mom. Izumi chirped. Up. Playing. Izuku echoed. Totally normal, totally safe playtime. Izuku folded her arms, scanning the two of them. Playing, huh? Sweat trickled down their foreheads. Izuku sighed, shaking her head. All right, just be careful, okay? Yes, Mom, they both said in sync. She shot them one last knowing look before disappearing inside. The second the door closed, they exhaled in unison. That was close, Izumi muttered. Izuku suddenly narrowed his eyes at her. Why did you lie to Mom? Izumi blinked, then smirked. Well, we both did, didn't we? Izuku frowned. Yeah, but you started it. And heroes aren't supposed to lie. Izumi rolled her eyes. You dumb. She flicked him on the forehead. Ow. Heroes don't lie, sure. But I'm your sister first. And I'll lie if it means protecting you. Izuku stared at her, stunned. Then slowly he smiled. You're the best sister ever. Izumi beamed, then threw her arms around him. And you're the bestest brother ever. She pulled back, grinning. So next time, let me help, okay? Izuku chuckled. Alright, alright. Izumi lifted her hand, holding out her pinky. Promise. Izuku stared at it for a moment before linking his pinky with hers. Promise. Izumi's smile widened. Together forever? Izuku's grin matched hers. Together forever. And in that moment, they truly believed it. A few months later, laughter echoed through the forest path, bouncing between the trees as 5 kids strolled along, their chatter and giggles blending into the crisp afternoon air. At the front, Katsuki Bakugo lazily dribbled a basketball, smirking like he was the king of the world. Shoto and Shuko Todoroki, the infamous Fire and Ice twins, trailed close behind, their identical heterochromatic eyes scanning the path ahead. And leading the charge? The dynamic duo of chaos, the unstoppable sibling menace, the nightmare of mothers everywhere. Izuku Midoriya and Izumi Yagi. Izuku wiped a tear from his eye, still wheezing from the last joke. Okay, but seriously, I can't believe you actually fell into the lake. Izumi cackled, nearly tripping over a root. It was an accident. Shoto muttered, crossing his arms. Yeah? Then why did you scream like a dying goat? Bakugo snickered, spinning the basketball on his finger. Shoto's eye twitched. I did not scream like a goat. It was kind of a goat sound, Shuko giggled. Shoto turned to his twin, scandalized. Et2 Shuko? Before she could answer, Izuku suddenly stopped walking, his laughter cutting short as his ears twitched. A sound, faint, desperate, rustling above them. Izumi noticed the shift immediately. Bro! Izuku didn't answer. He was already looking up. Izumi followed his gaze. Shoto, Shuko, and Bakugo took another step before realizing their friends were no longer beside them. Oi, nerds, what are you? Bakugo turned, blinking when he saw them staring at a tree. Huh! Shuko followed their gaze and gasped. Oh no! A kitty! Perched high in the branches, a tiny white kitten clung for dear life, its little body trembling. Shuko's eyes immediately turned watery. We have to help it. Bakugo scoffed. Can't it just come down on its own? It's a baby, you barbarian, Shoto deadpanned. Izuku and Izumi turned to each other. No words needed. Just one look. Then they smirked. Showtime. Izumi bolted first, dropping into position near the tree's base, hands cupped together like a launch pad. Izuku took a running start. Bakugo barely had time to process what was happening before he shouted, Wait, what are you idiots? Izuku jumped, planting his foot onto Izumi's hands, and with a synchronized breath, Izumi launched him skyward. Izuku twisted midair, gripping a thick branch as he swung himself up. Perfect landing. From below, Bakugo, Shoto, and Shuko stared, mouths open. That was so cool. Shuko squealed. Izuku flashed a grin, turning to the kitten nearby. All right, little guy, let's get you out of here. The kitten hissed. Izuku blinked. Rude. Still, he reached out slowly, doing his best, trust me, I'm a hero, smile. I won't drop you, I promise. Just, there we go. He scooped up the tiny fluff ball and looked down. Izumi catch. I swear if you miss, he dropped the kitten. Eek. Shuko let out an ear-piercing squeal as the kitten flailed midair, but Izumi caught it flawlessly, cradling it to her chest. The tiny thing blinked up at her, utterly betrayed. Izumi gently set it down, watching as it sprinted away like it had seen the face of danger. Be free, little guy, she cheered. Then she turned back to Izuku. Okay, your turn. Jump. Izuku saluted. Aye, Captain. And then, because he was Izuku, he let himself fall backward dramatically. Bro! At the last second, Izumi shot forward, arms outstretched. Shoto, Shuko, and Bakugo rushed in, catching him together. Gotcha! They all yelled in unison. They staggered slightly before dropping him unceremoniously onto the ground. Ow! Izuku blinked up at them. Not as graceful as I imagined. Shuko practically vibrated with excitement. That was amazing. How did you even? Izuku grinned, rubbing the back of his head. We've been practicing. Izumi smirked. Ever since this dumb fell out of a tree saving a cat. Izuku gasped. Traitor! Shuko's face dropped. You almost died? Izuku waved his arms wildly. No, she's exaggerating. I'm alive, see? Very much alive. He shot a betrayed glare at Izumi. She simply giggled. Bakugo crossed his arms, rolling his eyes. I could do it better. Izuku chuckled nervously. Sure, Kaken. But you sound doubtful. That I have no idea what you're talking about. Shoto suddenly turned to his sister. Should we ask Dad to train us with something like that? Shuko, still wiping away tears, hummed in thought. Dad said he'll only train us once we get our quirks, but he also said it depends. Depends on what? Izuku asked. Shuko shrugged. Dunno. I only heard him mutter that last part. Izumi grinned. Doesn't matter. We're all gonna be trained, and we're all going to UA one day. Yeah. We'll be unstoppable. And kick villain butt. Bakugo added. Definitely. Shoto nodded. While Bakugo and Shoto excitedly plotted their future victories, Izuku, Izumi, and Shuko simply laughed, shaking their heads. As their giggles died down, Izuku lifted his hand, placing it in the center. Together forever? Izumi and Shuko smiled, placing their hands over his. Together forever. The promise was sealed. And for now, before the world changed, before challenges arose, they truly believed it. The garden echoed with laughter and battle cries, the clashing of invisible forces, and the dramatic, "Take this, villain," followed by exaggerated rolling on the grass. Izuku and Izumi were at it again, lost in their grand adventure. One where Izuku was the noble hero, and Izumi was the totally not evil mastermind. They dashed between trees, capes made out of towels flapping behind them as they launched their next attack on each other. But just as Izuku prepared his final move, a familiar voice interrupted their battle. Kids! Toshinori Yagi, their father, walked toward them in his usual deflated form. We have guests. Come say hi. Toshinori called before heading back inside. Izuku and Izumi exchanged a look, shrugged, and then sprinted after him. Inside, they skidded into the living room, their feet barely keeping up with their momentum. The moment they entered, they spotted two unfamiliar faces. One was a tall man with light brown hair, glasses, and a friendly smile. He was dressed casually but carried himself with confidence. The real mystery was the tiny girl clinging to his breathed leg. She had golden blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and a dress so pink it almost made Izuku blink. Toshinori grinned. Kids, this is David Shield. An old friend of mine. The man knelt down, smiling warmly. You must be Izuku and Izumi. Right. Izuku, ever the polite one, beamed. Yes, sir. Hi. Izumi added, grinning ear to ear. David chuckled before nudging his daughter forward. This is my daughter, Melissa. He looked down at the tiny blonde, who tightened her grip on his breathes. Say hi, sweetheart. Melissa froze, eyes darting between the two grinning kids in front of her. Itch hi, she whispered, voice barely above a squeak. Izuku and Izumi exchanged another look. Their grins widened. Come on. Izuku grabbed one of her hands. Let's go play heroes and villains. Izumi grabbed the other. Wait. Melissa gasped as she was suddenly dragged toward the garden, her feet barely keeping up. David blinked. Should we? Toshinori sighed, shaking his head fondly. Nope. It's too late. She's been claimed. David chuckled, watching his daughter's panicked expression disappear into the backyard. Honestly, I'm glad. It's been tough for her since we moved. Not many kids to play with. It's good to see them take her under their wing. Toshinori smirked. Well, they are a handful. David laughed. That I already figured out. In the garden, Melissa finally stumbled to a stop, breathless, as Izuku and Izumi let go of her hands. She looked around, wide-eyed, still processing what just happened. Izuku grinned. Do you like heroes, Melissa? Melissa perked up instantly. Oh, of course. Izumi nudged her playfully. Then don't be shy. We're all hero fans here. Izuku clapped his hands. Alright, we're playing. Melissa, you get to pick. Do you want to be a hero or the villain? Melissa hesitated for half a second, but then her lips curled into a smile. It had been so long since she got to do something like this. Since she got to just be a kid. Hero, she declared, standing up straighter. Izuku and Izumi grinned. Then let's do this. And just like that, the afternoon was filled with chaotic joy, Melissa running through the grass, giggling as she chased Izumi down, Izuku dramatically collapsing after being hit by a super move, and the three of them rolling around in the dirt, faces red from laughter. By the time they finally collapsed onto the grass, sweaty and covered in a ridiculous amount of dirt, they were still laughing. Melissa sighed, staring at the sky, a content smile on her face. It's been a long time since I had this much fun. Izuku and Izumi glanced at each other, then grinned. Of course. Izuku said with a chuckle. Fun is our middle name. Izumi sat up, dusting off her hands. Hey, Melissa, do you want to be a hero when you grow up? Melissa's eyes shone. Of course. I want to help people. Just like my dad. Izuku suddenly sat up, eyes alight with excitement. Then it's decided. Melissa blinked. What? Izumi pumped her fist. You'll be on our hero team when we grow up. Melissa gawked. Hero team? Yep. Izuku grinned. We'll be the greatest hero team ever. Izumi turned to Melissa, tilting her head. So? What do you say? Melissa's breath hitched. Her heart swelled. She had spent so much time alone, wishing she could make friends like this. Her eyes watered, and she quickly wiped her face. Sorry, she sniffled. Izuku panicked. Huh? What's wrong? Did we say something bad? Melissa shook her head, smiling through her tears. No, I'm just happy. Izuku and Izumi exchanged a glance, then grinned. So you're in? Izumi asked, holding out her hand. Melissa took a deep breath, then placed her hand on top. I'm in. Izuku placed his hand over hers, grinning ear to ear. Then, together forever? Melissa's heart soared. She nodded, smiling wide. Together forever. And they truly believed it. The kindergarten playground was alive with activity, kids screaming about hero teams, others engaged in the high-stakes drama of the jungle gym, and a particularly intense argument over who got to be All Might in a pretend battle. But none of that mattered to Izuku Midoriya and Shuko Todoroki. They were on a mission. In the sandbox, Shuko sat hunched over, tongue sticking out in concentration, as she carefully patted a tiny sandcastle model using one of the plastic molds. A few feet away, Izuku stood proudly beside a sand fortress. Not just a sandcastle, a fortress. Complete with towers, walls, and a moat dug with his bare hands. Thank you very much. It was almost as tall as him, and somehow, it was structurally sound despite being made of sand. I finished. Izuku announced, throwing his arms up like he had just won an Olympic event. Shuko barely glanced up from her own work, nodding absently. It's cool. Then she actually looked. Her jaw dropped. Her plastic sand mold fell from her hands. What the heck? Shuko shrieked, eyes wide. Izuku beamed. Cool, right? Shuko, still stunned, walked over, staring up at the behemoth of a castle like it had personally insulted her tiny sandcastle. How did you do that? Izuku simply tapped his temple, grinning. All in here. Shuko slowly turned back to her own sandcastle, which was barely the size of her shoe. Carefully, she lifted the plastic mold away, revealing a crumbling heap. Her shoulders slumped. Her eyes watered. And then, it collapsed entirely. Shuko let out a tiny, heartbroken noise. Izuku immediately panicked. Wait. It's okay. We can fix it. He hurried over, crouching down beside her. Shuko wiped at her eyes furiously. It's not fair. Yours is so big. I thought mine was good. Izuku frowned, then gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Hey, you're not bad at it. You just need to practice. Shuko sniffled, looking at him. Really? Izuku nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. So let's build one together. That way, you'll get better. Shuko blinked a few times. Then, her eyes lit up. Together. Izuku grinned. Together. Just as they were about to start, a voice called out. Izuku! The two turned to see Izumi, standing near the playground fence, waving with both their backpacks slung over her arms. Mom's here. Izuku looked between his sister and Shuko, a small frown forming. I guess it'll have to wait, he muttered. Shuko tilted her head. Can't you stay a little longer? Izuku shook his head. Nah, we're going to the doctor. They're gonna check Izumi and me to see what our quirks are. Shuko's eyes widened. Oh, my dad's taking me and Shoto to see ours soon too. Izuku's frown immediately disappeared. Really? That's so cool. Shuko smiled, nodding. We'll tell each other about it later, okay? Izuku grinned back. Of course. He waved before running toward Izumi, who promptly threw his bag at him like an overenthusiastic baseball pitcher. He barely caught it. Bye, Shuko. Izumi called out, waving. Bye. Shuko waved back, her small hands still a little dusty from the sand. As Izuku ran off, she looked at the half-built sandcastle, still sitting there in the sandbox. She smiled. Next time, they'd build it together. And for now, she truly believed it. The doctor's office was bright, sterile, and far too cold for comfort. The faint hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Izuku Midoriya sat anxiously, her twins nestled on either side of her. Izumi, swinging her legs, had an excited sparkle in her eyes. Izuku, however, sat still, gripping the edges of the chair as if expecting a villain to pop out from behind the desk. The doctor, an older man with strange, reflective glasses, adjusted his papers before finally speaking. So, what's the news, doctor? Inko asked, her voice calm, but her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. She had a feeling, a nagging sense that something was about to go terribly wrong. The doctor barely spared her a glance. Well, first of all, congratulations. Inko exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Your little girl here has quite the powerful quirk. Izumi beamed, bouncing slightly in her seat. Izuku turned to look at her, and when their eyes met, he grinned, giving her a thumbs up. Awesome, Izumi, he whispered, his excitement genuine. The doctor continued, unfazed. Her quirk is a form of electrokinesis, allowing her to manipulate electricity and other forms of energy at will. The full extent of her abilities is still unknown, but with proper training, she could become incredibly strong. He pushed his glasses further up his nose. Izumi's eyes sparkled. I have electricity powers. Like, zoom zap POW? The doctor gave a slow nod. Something like that. Inko sighed in relief, her heart swelling with pride. But then, the feeling returned. The tightness in her chest. The nagging sense that something was still off. The doctor cleared his throat, glancing at the other child in the room. For your son. Izuku stiffened. His fingers dug into his jeans. A deep, twisting dread settled in his stomach. He already knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. The doctor adjusted his glasses again, completely unfazed by the weight of the words he was about to say. I'm sorry to inform you, but he is quirkless. Silence. The room froze. Izumi whipped her head toward her brother, eyes wide with disbelief. She saw the exact moment the shock hit him. Izuku's mouth hung slightly open, but no sound came out. His green eyes, so full of warmth and life just moments ago, were wide, unblinking and empty. He felt his heartbeat in his ears. Quirkless? Quirkless? But he was supposed to be a hero. He was supposed to train, grow stronger, save people. He was supposed to stand next to Izumi. This had to be a mistake. That's all from my part, the doctor said casually, as if he hadn't just torn apart a little boy's world with a few words. You may leave now. The walk out of the office was eerily quiet. Izumi clutched her mother's hand, sneaking nervous glances at her brother, who walked mechanically, his head lowered, his eyes dull. Even the air felt heavier. Izuku barely heard anything. The world around him was muted, distant, like he was hearing everything through water. Quirkless. His mind kept repeating it, over and over. Quirkless. Like it was some sort of curse. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Izuku flinched, blinking rapidly as he was yanked from his thoughts. Izumi stood in front of him, brows furrowed, her usual bright grin replaced with something more serious. It doesn't matter. Her voice was firm. Izuku looked at her, confused. It doesn't matter that you don't have a quirk, she repeated, her grip on his shoulder tightening. I know you can still be a hero. I know you. You won't give up. We made a promise, remember? Izuku just stared at her. We promised we'd be the greatest heroes when we grow up. Quirk or no quirk? She leaned in, squinting. Or were you planning to break that promise? Izuku essayed in a sharp breath. Break the promise? Never. He forced a small, shaky smile. Never. Izumi's grin returned, full force as she moved out her hand, pinky extended. Then prove it. Izuku stared at her hand. Hesitation. His fingers twitched. Did it really not matter? Would he really still get to stand beside them? He reached forward, their pinkies linking. Together forever. They smiled. Inko watched from behind, her own smile thin, but hopeful. She wanted to believe them. She needed to believe them. But as she watched the two children cling to each other like lifelines, something in her gut told her. The world would never let it be that easy. It had started with excitement. Pure, innocent excitement. Shuko, Shoto, come to the dojo. Their father's words had set their little hearts racing. For as long as they could remember, Endeavor had been a looming presence in their lives. Untouchable, larger than life, second only to All Might. He was their father, but also the number 2 hero, the strongest man they knew. And for years, he had said the same thing, I'll train you when your quirks appear. Well, they had appeared. And now they would be heroes like him. Shuko and Shoto grinned at each other, giggling as they raced through the halls, the wooden floors creaking beneath their tiny feet. They had always done everything together. They were twins, after all. They would learn together, train together, become great together. Their father would be proud of them. Wouldn't he? The dojo was cold and empty, its wooden walls absorbing sound, making the space feel too big, too quiet. Endeavor stood in the center, arms crossed, staring down at the twins with icy blue eyes. For a moment, neither child moved. His presence alone was suffocating. Then, after a nudge from Shoto, Shuko took a deep breath and stepped forward, her little hands balled into excited fists. Dad, we can do it. We both have our quirks now. She raised her tiny palms, ice forming on one, fire flickering on the other. Shoto mimicked her, a mirror image, grinning as his flames burned a little brighter. Endeavor watched them for a long moment. Then, he nodded. Show me. The twins glanced at each other, then nodded back. They turned toward the training dummies at the edge of the dojo. Shoto moved first, stepping forward with focused determination, just like the heroes on TV. With a deep breath, he lifted his hand, ice surged forth, freezing the dummy solid in mere seconds. A perfect execution. Shoto beamed, turning back to his father, expecting a smile? A nod? Instead, what? Shoto's head snapped to the side, the sound of the slap echoing through the room. Shuko's breath hitched. Shoto stumbled, a red mark blooming across his cheek. He blinked, stunned, before slowly looking up at his father. Endeavor's face was cold. Faster. Shoto swallowed hard. What? That was too slow, Endeavor snapped. A villain wouldn't wait for you. Again. Shoto froze, his small hands trembling slightly. Then, he quickly turned back, ice forming once more. This time, he forced it out, sharper, harder, faster, his heart pounding. The dummy froze over in half the time. Endeavor grunted. Better. Shoto let out a shaky breath. Shuko stood beside him, her excitement waning, twisting into anxiety. But this was training, right? This was normal. She swallowed, then stepped forward. I can do it too. She lifted her hands, a stream of ice shot forward, covering her dummy in a sparkling sheet of frost. Perfect. She turned back, smiling hesitantly. Maybe he would praise her. Maybe he would. What are you doing? Shuko flinched. That's not what you're supposed to be using. Her father's voice was sharp. Shuko's hands curled into fists. But I did it right. No. Endeavor took a step forward, towering over her. You have fire. You will use fire. Shuko's breath hitched. Fire. She liked her ice better. It was gentle, it was calm. Fire felt different. But she didn't argue. She lifted her other hand. A flame flickered to life. Endeavor watched her closely, his jaw tight. Hit the target. Shuko hesitated. Her flame flickered. Endeavor's face darkened. Now. She gasped, then quickly threw the fire forward. It hit the dummy weakly, barely enough to singe it. She turned back, nervous, waiting for his reaction. Pathetic. The word cut. Her stomach twisted. I can do it again. No. I've seen enough. Shuko's eyes burned. She wanted to say something, to argue, but she felt so small under his gaze. Shoto stepped forward, his tiny body tense. Don't talk to her like that. Endeavor's gaze snapped to him. Shoto straightened, forcing his voice to be stronger. She did good. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the hand came down again. What? Shoto crumpled, his vision flashing white. Shuko screamed. Endeavor didn't even look at her. You do not talk back to me. Shoto gasped, clutching his cheek, his head spinning. Endeavor turned back to Shuko. Do you understand? Shuko nodded so fast her neck hurt. She didn't dare speak. Endeavor turned away. Lesson over. He walked out. Just like that. Like nothing had happened. The twins sat on the dojo floor. Shoto's cheek was red and swollen. Shuko's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Neither spoke. The room felt too big. Too empty. Too cold. It was wrong. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Shoto clenched his fists. His chest burned, something hot and ugly growing inside him. This was training. This was normal. Right? He stared at the ground. I hate him. Shuko flinched. Shoto's jaw tightened. He's not a hero. Shuko swallowed hard. She wanted to say something, to disagree, to remind him. He's our dad. But the words never came. Because, deep down, she wasn't sure if she believed them. Instead, she whispered, so quietly she wasn't sure if he even heard her. Maybe we just have to get stronger. Shoto didn't answer. The twins sat there, in the cold and empty dojo, the bruises already forming, outside and within. They were still just children. But something inside them had already begun to break. And neither of them knew how to stop it. Katsuki Bakugo had always been special. He knew this, even before he got his quirk. People liked him. He was loud, he was strong, and most importantly, people listened to him. That's just how things were. And then his quirk appeared. It was like something out of a movie, fire and fury bursting from his hands, the explosions crackling like fireworks. The moment it happened, the adults had gasped, their eyes shining with something strange, something that made his chest swell with pride. Incredible! What a powerful quirk! This kid's gonna be something great someday. Katsuki had grinned, watching the way the other kids stared. Some with fear, but all of them with respect. That's when he realized, this is power. From that moment on, everything shifted. The world wasn't just fun and games anymore. It was a ladder. And quirks? Quirks determined who climbed it. He wasn't stupid. He saw it all around him. The kids with flashy, strong quirks? They were at the top. They were the ones everyone flocked to, praised, admired. The ones with boring, weak quirks? They were. And the ones with no quirks at all? They were nowhere. Invisible. Nothing. Bakugo wasn't about to be nothing. He was climbing to the top. And no one was going to stop him. Daycare was different now. Before, it was just a place to play and be loud. Now, it was a place to prove himself. Bakugo stormed into the playground, hands sparking excitedly, ready to show off his latest trick. He was gonna... Kaken! A familiar, excited voice called out. Bakugo blinked and turned to see Izuku and Izumi rushing toward him, grinning like they hadn't seen him in years. Which, okay, it had been a while. He snorted, crossing his arms. What, you nerds miss me or something? Obviously. Izumi huffed. Where have you been? Izuku nodded eagerly. Yeah. We haven't even seen Shoto or Shuko either. At that, Bakugo paused. Now that he thought about it. The twins had been missing for days now. That was weird. Huh. Bakugo frowned. They're not sick or anything? Izumi shook her head, her expression shifting slightly. I heard Mom talking to their mom on the phone. She hesitated. Their dad decided to transfer them to another school. Izuku froze at the reminder. His face fell, shoulders slumping, like someone had eaten all the air out of him. What? Izumi frowned. Yeah. It was really sudden. Bakugo scowled. That's weird. Why would they? I don't know, Izumi admitted. But she didn't finish. And Bakugo didn't need her to. Because suddenly, he did know. Shoto and Shuko's dad. Endeavor. That guy was always strange. Bakugo had seen him a couple of times, big, loud, serious, but something about him always felt. Shoto never talked about him. Neither did Shuko. And now, they were just gone? Something about that didn't sit right. Titich. Bakugo kicked at the ground, annoyed at how weird this felt. Whatever. They'll probably be fine. But Izuku wasn't fine. He stood there, still staring at the ground, his fingers twitching slightly. Now I'll never get to build my sandcastle with Shuko. Bakugo blinked. And then he laughed. Pfft, what? Izuku looked up, confused. Bakugo just grinned, shaking his head. You're sad about a stupid sandcastle? Izuku pouted. It wasn't stupid. Dude, it's sand. Bakugo cackled. Just build another one. Izuku crossed his arms, puffing up like a little defensive pigeon. It's not the same. Bakugo rolled his eyes. Whatever, nerd. You're weird. Izuku huffed, but he didn't argue. And that was when it happened. Kaken. One of the kids called out. Show us your quirk again. Bakugo grinned, his mood instantly shifting back to excitement. Watch this. He raised his palm. Boom. A small explosion burst from his hand, crackling like firecrackers. The kids cheered, running over. Whoa. So cool. I want to do that. Your quirk is awesome, Bakugo. Bakugo smirked, feeling that familiar thrill of pride rush through him. He turned back to Izuku and Izumi, expecting them to be impressed too. But Izuku just stood there, watching, silent. Bakugo frowned. What's wrong with you? You look weird. Izuku shifted slightly, avoiding his gaze. Izumi bit her lip, hesitating. Then, softly, Izuku doesn't have a quirk. Silence. It hit like a punch to the gut. Bakugo froze. His eyes widened. What? Izuku swallowed. I'm quirkless. The word felt wrong. It sounded wrong. Bakugo stared at him. And then he laughed. Not a normal laugh. A sharp, incredulous laugh. You're kidding, right? Izuku's silence was answer enough. Bakugo's grin dropped. His hands clenched, his mind reeling. Quirkless. No power. No explosions. No nothing. Izuku, his friend, was nothing. His stomach twisted. A weird, uneasy feeling settled in his chest. Something the adults always whispered about. The quirkless can't keep up. They'll never be heroes. They're less. Bakugo didn't like that feeling. So he pushed it down. He shoved it aside. And instead, he grinned. Cruel. So you're just a loser, then? Izuku flinched. Izumi stepped forward, eyes burning with anger. He's not a loser. Bakugo snorted, arms crossed. Yeah? Then what is he? Izuku's fists clenched, his jaw tightening. I can stand up for myself, Izumi. She turned to him, surprised. But I can. His voice was quiet. Bakugo stared at him, something in Izuku's eyes making his stomach twist again. But he ignored it. Instead, he just smirked. Whatever, Deku. And just like that, Izuku wasn't Izuku anymore. He was Deku. Less than. Worthless. Quirkless. Bakugo didn't question why it felt so easy to say. Because this was just how the world worked. Right? And they truly believed it. Didn't they? Time moved forward and so did they. The years that followed were a delicate balance of change and consistency. Izuku never got his quirk. But that didn't stop him. It didn't stop Izumi either. They remained close despite their differences, despite the way their paths seemed to diverge, despite the way the world tried to pull them apart. They wouldn't let it. Not when they had each other. Izumi's quirk flourished. By the time she was 6, she could generate electricity with ease, enough to light up an entire room if she wanted. By 7, she was learning fine control, practicing the way currents flowed through her fingers, experimenting with how she could charge objects or repel them. It was thrilling. And their parents were proud. But their parents were proud of Izuku, too. Because even without a quirk, he grew. While Izumi trained her body, Izuku trained his mind. He threw himself into books, blueprints, schematics, anything he could get his hands on. At first, it was simple. He liked building things. He liked taking things apart, understanding how they worked. But then, his interest grew deeper. His mother noticed. So did his father. And they encouraged him. Toshinori brought him books on engineering, on robotics, on biomechanics. Inko found tutors, mentors who could help him learn beyond what school could offer. And Izuku thrived. But even as he spent hours in front of diagrams and circuits, he never stopped training with Izumi. They still had the same dream. Izuku still wanted to be a hero. And if his body wasn't his strength, then his mind would be. The air in the private training room was thick with concentration and challenge. It wasn't child's play anymore. This was real. Sweat dripped down Izuku's brow as he darted to the left, narrowly dodging a small burst of electricity from Izumi's fingertips. Too slow, Izu, she teased, grinning. Izuku didn't respond with words. Instead, he moved. Izumi was fast, but she wasn't unpredictable. He had been studying her patterns, memorizing the small tells in her stance before she attacked. As Izumi charged forward, aiming to tag his shoulder, he shifted just enough to slip past her, grabbing her wrist and using her own momentum to pivot her off balance. Izumi stumbled, eyes wide, then laughed. Not bad. Izuku grinned. She lunged at him again and this time, he was ready. Izumi had her power, and Izuku had his mind. Together, they pushed each other forward. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sun warm against their backs as Izuku and Izumi sat on the grassy hill behind their house, overlooking the small pond where they had spent countless afternoons. Izuku lay flat on his back, arms behind his head, staring at the clouds. Izumi sat beside him, cross-legged, fiddling with tiny sparks of electricity that danced between her fingers. It was one of those rare moments where the world felt simple, just two siblings hanging out, no expectations, no pressures. Then, Izumi's head snapped up. Huh. Izuku blinked, sitting up slightly. The TV outside the small garden patio had been left on, and a commercial played. The International Young Engineers Olympiad is opening its doors for the next generation of brilliant minds. Izuku sat up completely, eyes locked onto the screen. Taking place on Island, this competition will bring together some of the greatest young inventors, engineers, and innovators from all over the world. Izumi gasped, grinning. She turned to Izuku, only to find him already locked in a daze, his green eyes wide with excitement. Island. Engineering. He barely registered Izumi's elbow nudging his ribs. Izuku. Silence. Earth to Izuku. She shocked his arm lightly. Ow, Eyui. Izuku yelped, rubbing his arm, finally snapping out of it. Izumi smirked. You're totally gonna enter, right? Izuku blinked, the words settling in. Then, his face broke into a massive grin. Oh my god. I have to enter. Obviously. Izumi rolled her eyes. This is like your dream. Plus, you'd get to see Melissa again. Izuku perked up even more. Melissa? That's right. She's on Island. Oh my god. He leapt to his feet, pacing in circles. I need to tell Mom and Dad. I need to enter. I need to start planning. What kind of project do I even submit? What if I don't qualify? What if... Izuku? He froze mid-ramble, turning to Izumi. She just grinned, standing up beside him. You're overthinking. Izuku opened his mouth, then closed it. Okay, maybe a little. Izumi pointed back at the screen. Look. Izuku turned, and his eyes widened. And for the first time ever, the announcer continued, a new category has been added, the team division, where participants can enter in pairs. Izuku's mind exploded with possibilities. The pair. The team. Immediately, only one person came to mind. Melissa. Izumi grinned, nudging him again. Now you definitely have to enter. Izuku didn't hesitate. I'm calling him and Dad. And with that, he bolted for the house, Izumi laughing as she sprinted after him. Absolutely. Izuku stopped mid-sentence. Wait, what? His mother smiled warmly, placing a hand on his cheek. Of course, sweetheart. If this is what you want, we'll support you. Izuku's mouth flapped uselessly, as if he had expected more resistance. Really? Just like that? Why wouldn't we? Toshinori chuckled from where he leaned against the kitchen counter. Izuku, you love engineering. You've worked hard. And this is a wonderful opportunity. Izuku blinked rapidly, trying to process how easy this was. Plus, Toshinori added, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, I haven't seen David in quite some time. This will be a perfect excuse to catch up. Izuku's brain short-circuited. He had spent the last 2 minutes rehearsing an entire speech in his head to convince them. And they had just agreed immediately. Well, okay then. Izumi grinned, clapping Izuku on the back. That was easy. Now go tell Melissa. Izuku. Izumi. Get down here. The booming call of Toshinori echoed through the house, sparking an immediate sibling race. From opposite ends of the hallway, Izuku and Izumi locked eyes, their competitive instincts igniting. Last one down has to do the other's chores. Izumi declared, already bolting forward. Wait, that's not fair. Izuku yelped, sprinting after her. It was a fierce battle, filled with shoves, dodges, and questionable acrobatics down the staircase. Izuku jumped the last 3 steps, hoping to close the gap, but Izumi, already at the bottom, smirked triumphantly. Boom. Victory is mine. Izuku landed with a huff, crossing his arms. You have an unfair advantage, says the guy who tried to swing down the banister. Fair. Before their banter could escalate, a dry chuckle cut through the air. Still as chaotic as ever, I see. Both kids froze, then their eyes lit up. Grandpa Torino. Like missiles, the two launched themselves at the elderly man. Hey. G get off me, you brats. Gran Torino grumbled, though the tiniest of smiles twitched on his lips. We missed you. Izuku beamed, squeezing tighter. Yeah. Izumi nuzzled into his shoulder. Torino clicked his tongue. It's annoying. What brings you here, Grandpa? Izumi grinned up at him. Torino grunted, adjusting his cape. Well, your father here seems to think you two need some proper training. Both twins froze. Training? Izuku blinked. Hero training. Torino smirked. Something like that. Izumi practically buzzed with excitement. Are you gonna train us? Torino snorted. No way. My training days are over. Ah. Both kids pouted. Then, but, Torino added, grinning as he glanced at Toshinori, I know someone willing to take the mantle. Toshinori cleared his throat, stepping aside. And that's when they saw him. A towering man, elderly yet unmistakably powerful, with broad shoulders, a commanding presence, and a calm but sharp gaze. His stance was solid, not as if he was merely standing there, but as if the ground itself was supporting him. Before Toshinori could even introduce him, Dan Ban. Both Izuku and Izumi shouted his name in unison, their eyes wide with shock. Dan Ban, the legendary martial artist, the famous Quirkless MSTR of self-defense, was standing in their living room. Dan chuckled. Seems like there's no need for introductions. You're gonna train us? Izuku practically vibrated. Dan nodded. From this day forward, I will be your MSTR. Izuku and Izumi exchanged looks, then exploded with cheers. Even Torino had to chuckle. Poor guy has no idea what he signed up for. At dawn, their training started. Every morning, Danban arrived, dressed in his signature black GI, eyes sharp, hands calloused from years of experience. He taught them the fundamentals, balance, footwork, strikes, counters. He emphasized precision over power, control over brute force. Izuku, with his sharp mind, absorbed everything like a sponge. Izumi, with her natural instincts, executed techniques flawlessly. They trained together, pushed each other, grew stronger. But over time, a gap began to form. It wasn't immediate. At first, Izuku could keep up, his strategic thinking and relentless determination compensating for his lack of raw power. But as Izumi's quirk developed, as her reflexes, speed, and strength naturally outpaced his own, it became painfully clear. Izuku could only go so far. Even when Izumi held back, even when she tried not to use her full power, Izuku noticed. And he hated it. One evening, in the middle of a sparring session, Izuku snapped. Stop holding back. Izumi stiffened mid-stance. Danban, standing at the side, raised an eyebrow. Izumi lowered her fists slightly. Izumi. Izuku clenched his fists. You're treating me like I'm weak. Izumi's expression faltered. I just don't want to hurt you. You're making it worse. Izuku shouted. Danban sighed. Enough. Both children froze at their MSDR's voice. Dan stepped forward, his calm but commanding presence silencing them. His gaze landed on Izuku first. You have a desperate need to prove yourself. Izuku's breath hitched. Then, Dan turned to Izumi. You underestimate the damage holding back can do. Izumi blinked, startled. But, sometimes, Dan said, not going all out is more insulting than losing. Izuku and Izumi lowered their heads. Dan crossed his arms. No fight is worse than the one between kin. A long, heavy silence. Then, Izuku sighed. Sorry. Izumi frowned. Me too. Dan nodded, satisfied. Good. Now again. This time, fight not to win, but to learn. And with that, the training resumed. For most students, middle school was just another chapter in their lives. For the Yagi twins, however, it was two completely different worlds. Izumi Yagi was the queen of the school. The moment she set foot on campus, she was surrounded by admirers. Izumi, come sit with us. Izumi, can I copy your notes? Izumi, wanna come to my party this weekend? Her natural charm, confidence, and incredible quirk made her untouchable. She was an icon, the daughter of the greatest hero in history, a prodigy with an electric presence, both literally and figuratively. Meanwhile, Izuku walked the halls alone. Despite being one of the top young minds in Japan, despite winning multiple national and international awards in engineering, mathematics, and physics, none of it mattered. Because he was still quirkless. And that was all anyone saw. The teachers ignored him. The students whispered about him. Even in competitions where he should have been celebrated, there was always a sense of dismissal. Like he was a freak occurrence rather than a genius. And worst of all, his childhood friend had become one of his worst enemies. Izuku had just returned from another victory. First place in the prefecture's latest engineering competition. Another gold medal, another certificate, another reason to feel proud. Yet, as he walked through the halls, clutching his latest award, he felt it before he even saw them. The heat of a small explosion. The shadows closing in. A familiar, cocky voice. A television screen flickered in a quiet living room. The anchor's voice was low, heavy with grief, a stark contrast to the usual cheerfulness of daytime news. It is with deep regret that we report the loss of former pro hero Tornado, real name Izumi Yagi, who was killed during an attempt to stop an unknown assailant. The villain had already taken the lives of several heroes before Tornado stepped in, allowing enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Though she fought valiantly, she ultimately succumbed to the killer's touch. The broadcast shifted to footage of the aftermath. A street painted in blood, the remains of a battle that should have never taken place. Her sacrifice prevented further casualties and forced the villain into retreat. The nation mourns the loss of a hero, a mother, and a beloved figure in the pro-hero community. A photo of Inko appeared on the screen, one from her prime, when she was still an active hero. She was smiling brightly, her green hair whipping in the wind, her cape billowing behind her like a storm. The news anchor continued. The Imperial Palace has announced a formal bounty for any information leading to the capture of the assailant. Law enforcement urges anyone with knowledge of the incident to come forward. A long, solemn pause. Then, the final words echoed. On behalf of this station and all of Japan, we extend our condolences to the family of Tornado and all those affected by this tragedy. The camera faded to black, and the world moved on. But for the Yagi family, time stopped. Bloody Wednesday, that was what they called it. The day Inko Yagi died. But with her, so much more was lost. A mother, a wife, a friend, and for the twins, an entire world. The sky was gray, fitting for the occasion. The wind that once seemed to dance with Inko's laughter was now still. Before the gathered crowd lay a casket, a symbol of finality, a truth they still couldn't accept. All Might, Toshinori Yagi, sat beside it. He was in his buffed state, a form meant to inspire hope, yet his face was unreadable. Was it the pain of losing his wife, or the strain of holding this form for too long? Even those who knew him couldn't tell. Heroes came and went, offering their condolences, their words of sorrow, their promises of justice. Toshinori nodded, thanked them politely, but his eyes were elsewhere. They were on a boy with green hair, Inko's boy. Izuku and Izumi stood among the crowd. People approached them, offering hugs, soft smiles, empty reassurances. Children of heroes. Celebrities. All of them came to pay their respects. The twins smiled, a fake, polite thing, because that was what they were supposed to do. What their mother would have wanted. But inside, Izuku felt like he was crumbling. Each smile, each word of comfort, was like a hammer to his ribs. Mitsuki Bakugo was inconsolable. She threw herself at the casket, gripping the wood as though she could pull Inko back. "You promised we'd grow old together," she sobbed, her voice raw with grief. Her husband, Masaru, tried to gently pull her back, but Mitsuki didn't budge. Her tears soaked the casket, her fingernails digging into the polished wood. "I swear," she whispered between sobs, "we'll find him. We'll find him and we'll make him pay." Beside her, Katsuki Bakugo stood silently, devoid of his usual bravado. Izuku barely recognized him. He was just a boy at a funeral, mourning someone he loved. Izuku didn't know how to reconcile the two versions of him, so he didn't try. A tall figure stood among the mourners. Izuku's gaze sharpened, endeavor. The man stood silent, arms crossed, his gaze lowered. Yet Izuku didn't see Shoto or Shuko with him. His jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists. It had been years since he'd seen them. He hoped he would see them here. But they weren't. And Endeavor didn't even look at him. Izuku exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. This is not what Mom would have wanted. But the weight in his chest grew heavier. Grief crawled into his throat, tightening like a vice. Suddenly, tears burned at his eyes. He fought them back, for his mother, for her memory. But in his heart, he could only whisper, "Please come back." But the wind stayed still, and she never answered. The air was heavy, thick with sorrow and silence. Among the gathered mourners stood 4 men, separate from the crowd but connected in grief. They were All Might's closest allies: Grand Torino, Sir Night Eye, Detective Tsukachi, and Danban. Each had played a role in the war against All for One, standing beside Toshinori Yagi, helping him bear the weight of his impossible burden. Now, they stood together once more, at the funeral of his wife, at the funeral of one of their own. A moment passed in silence, their eyes trained on the figure by the casket. All Might in his buffed state, unmoving. His golden hair seemed dim, his once proud shoulders slumped, his usual radiant presence fading at the edges. It was subtle, but to those who knew him, it was obvious. Something was wrong. Tsukachi exhaled, shaking his head. I'm worried about him. Gran Torino's arms were crossed, his sharp eyes never leaving Tashinori. That's an understatement. Night Eye's gaze was calculating, his expression unreadable. He doesn't look right, Tsukachi continued. And I don't mean in the his wife just died kind of way. Something else is off. The others didn't disagree. Torino's eyes narrowed. He's thinking. Night Eye sighed. And whatever it is, it can't be good. He never thinks straight when his emotions are in the way. They all knew this too well. Night Eye adjusted his glasses, his voice grave. I have a hunch it relates to the children. Danban, who had been quiet until now, turned his head slightly. What makes you say that? Night Eye paused, his lips pressing into a thin line. Call it a gut feeling. His fingers tapped lightly against his arm. Having the power to look into the future has made me trust my instincts more. Dan let out a quiet breath. Hard to argue with that. Tsukachi glanced around the sea of mourners. Has anyone seen the children? Gran Torino sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. They've been gone for a few minutes now. Probably needed some air. Dan crossed his arms, his gaze drifting toward the distant tree line. They're tougher than they look. His voice was steady, confident. They're strong, but they need time. Night Eye nodded. Time heals some wounds. But others? No one finished the thought. Because they all knew, some wounds never heal. Dan's gaze flickered to the distance, to the vanishing point where the horizon met the sky. Time would tell. Would those children succumb to their pain? Or would they rise like a phoenix? The night air was cold, but Izumi Yagi's blood was boiling. She ran, her feet pounding against the pavement, pushing herself further away from the crowds, from the funeral, from the empty condolences. She needed space. She needed air. She needed to scream. She didn't stop until she reached a secluded alleyway, hidden from the prying eyes of mourners. Finally, she let it out. Her breath hitched as her entire body shook with rage. Demon IT. She punched the wall, electricity sparking from her fingertips. Demon IT. Demon IT. Her mother, her kind, appealing, strong mother, was gone. And the person responsible was still out there. Still breathing. She could still hear her mother's voice in her head, still see her smile. But she would never hear it again. Tears streamed down her face as she trembled, clenching her fists so tightly her nails dug into her palms. Her whole body crackled with power, a storm barely contained. I'll find him, she screamed to the empty night. I'll find him and I'll make him pay. Her voice echoed through the alleyway. It was a promise. A vow. A declaration of war. That's not what a hero does. Izumi froze. The voice was calm, yet sharp. She whipped around, but there was no one there. Then, a presence. Above her. She looked up. There, perched on the alley wall like a cat, was a man. Dressed entirely in black, his long dark hair hung loose, framing sharp red eyes that watched her closely. He looked bored, like he'd seen this scene play out 1,000 times before. Izumi's instincts kicked in, her electricity sparking once more as she took a fighting stance. Who the hell are you? The man simply blinked, then stepped down from the wall with an almost unnatural grace. Don't worry, he said. I'm a hero. Name's Eraserhead. Eraserhead. The name rang a bell. She had heard it before, from Izuku. One of his long quirk analysis rants. The man who could erase quirks just by looking at someone. A quirk that could turn the strongest hero into a powerless civilian. Izumi remained tense. Eraserhead stuffed his hands into his pockets. A hero seeks to bring someone to justice, he said, voice flat. Not cast it on their own. Izumi's jaw tightened. Why not? She demanded. We're already entrusted with people's lives. Why shouldn't we decide who's worthy and who's not? Based on what? Eraserhead asked. On a strict moral code, Izumi shot back. And adherence to the laws. And how would you enforce that? Izumi crossed her arms. A purge of all corrupt heroes. Only those who pass the test stay. Eraserhead raised an eyebrow. And who decides who's corrupt? The law does. Eraserhead sighed. And if the law decides a certain group should be persecuted? Then what? Izumi paused. Then morality comes in, she said slowly. Eraserhead gave a small, almost amused smirk. Morality isn't always so simple. He took a step closer, his red eyes unblinking. Some heroes would agree with the persecution. Others wouldn't. Each side would see the other as morally bankrupt. You think heroes should be judge, jury, and executioner? They'll get it wrong. Over and over again. Izumi's hands shook. She wanted to argue, to fight back. But she couldn't. Because she knew he was right. I get how you feel. Eraserhead's voice was softer now, but still firm. Izumi's head snapped up. You do. Eraserhead nodded. I lost someone to a villain too. Izumi's breath hitched. He didn't say who or how, but she knew that pain. She felt it every second of every day. But this isn't the way to release your anger, Eraserhead said. Izumi clenched her fists. Then what is? Eraserhead sighed, rubbing the back of his head. You still have living, breathing people you love, right? Izumi hesitated. Then slowly she nodded. Eraserhead met her eyes, his gaze steady. Then protect them. Love them. That's the best thing you can do. Izumi swallowed. She thought about Izuku. She thought about how people treated him. How they mocked him, shunned him, belittled him. How the world had already decided he was worthless. Her hands curled into fists. He wasn't. She knew what she had to do. She had to protect him. She had to shield him from the cruelty of this world, from the people who would never accept him, from the villains who would take advantage of him. She was strong. She was powerful. And she would use that power to protect the only family she had left. No matter what. Eraserhead sighed, seeing the shift in her eyes, but not fully understanding it. Go home, kid, he muttered. You've got people waiting for you. Izumi exhaled slowly, her storm simmering down, but it didn't disappear. Not fully. She nodded. Yeah, I do. And as she walked away, a new thought solidified in her mind. Justice wasn't just about law and order. Justice was about power. And she would wield it for the ones she loved. No matter what it took. The world was too loud. Too many voices. Too many people. Too many well-meaning condolences that meant nothing. Izuku Yagi needed air. He needed space. So, like his sister before him, he slipped away from the funeral crowd, ducking past mourners and familiar faces until he found himself in the gardens behind the cemetery. A small, secluded place. Quiet. He let out a slow breath, pressing his back against a tree, staring blankly at the sky above. His fingers curled into his dress breathes, his whole body tense. He wanted to cry. He wanted to scream. But he couldn't. Because he had to be strong. That was what everyone expected of him, wasn't it? He was the oldest. He was his father's son. He was Izumi's brother. If he let himself break, then what would happen to them? What would happen to his sister? His father? His family? His breath shook in his chest. He clenched his fists. He had to ring. A vibration in his pocket. His phone. Izuku frowned and pulled it out. His heart clenched when he saw the name flashing across the screen. Melissa Shield. He accepted the call instantly. Before he could even say anything, a familiar voice rang through the speaker. Izuku. His throat closed up at the concern in her tone. How are you? How's Uncle Might? How's Izumi? Izuku took a slow breath, forcing himself to steady. He had to sound okay. I'm fine, he said. A beat of silence. Don't lie to me. Melissa's voice was gentle but firm. Izuku, your mom just... You can't be fine. His chest tightened. His fingers dug into the fabric of his breathes. He swallowed. I have to be strong. No, you don't. His breath hitched. Melissa sighed on the other end. You don't have to carry this alone. Izuku's grip on his phone tightened. She continued, her voice quieter now. I'm sorry we're not there. Dad tried, but all flights were grounded because of the convention in New York. We couldn't get out in time. Izuku shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. It's okay. You don't have to apologize. I do, she said softly. I should be there. Another silence. Izuku swallowed the lump in his throat and forced a small, shaky smile. I'm just glad you called. A voice called out on Melissa's end, and she sighed. I have to go. Izuku nodded, even though she couldn't see. Of course. But Izuku, Melissa's voice was firm. If anything happens, if you ever need to talk, call me, okay? Izuku bit his lip, his chest aching, but he forced himself to nod. Yeah. I will. Promise. He hesitated. Then softly, promise. The call ended. Izuku stared at the blank screen. His hands shook. His entire body shook. But he couldn't fall apart. He couldn't. He had to be strong. Strong for Dad. Strong for Izumi. Strong for himself. His mother wouldn't have wanted him to fall apart. She would have wanted him to keep moving forward. He had to be strong. He had to be. You don't have to be alone. Izuku froze. His breath caught in his throat. Because that voice, he knew it. Slowly his head snapped up. From the bushes nearby, a figure stepped forward. A girl with long, uneven bangs, a scarred face, and sharp gray eyes. Older than the last time he saw her. Taller. Thinner. Different. But still the same. Still Shuko Todoroki. She stood there, shifting slightly on her feet, rubbing her arm nervously. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. Iche. A small, awkward laugh. It's been a while. Izuku stared. For the first time since his mother died, he felt like he could breathe. Before Izuku could react, before he could even process that Shuko Todoroki was standing right in front of him, she hugged him. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't awkward. It was warm. Tight. A desperate embrace, as if she had been holding it in for years. Her voice was muffled against his shoulder, but he heard it clear as day. I'm sorry for your loss. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to react. But then, slowly, his arms came up, wrapping around her in return. Thanks, Shuko, he whispered. The words felt small. Insufficient. But she just nodded against him. She understood. When she finally pulled back, Izuku blinked and asked, How? How are you here? I didn't see you with Endeavor at the funeral. Shuko hesitated, rubbing her arm. I kind of snuck out, she admitted. Izuku blinked. Then, despite himself, despite everything, he chuckled. Sneaking out, huh? Didn't take you for the rebellious type. Shuko gave a small, lopsided smirk, a shadow of something that might have been a real smile. Guess I learned from the best. Izuku was about to tease her more, but then he noticed. His eyes traced her face. The scar on her left cheek. It had been there for years, he knew that. But still, his hand moved on its own, fingers grazing the damaged skin. What happened? Shuko's body tensed. Her eyes darted away. Izuku's breath hitched. That's when he saw it. The bruises on her arms. Some old. Some fresh. His chest tightened with something that felt an awful lot like rage. That man. His grip tightened, his body pushing up to stand. Shuko's eyes widened. Izuku. I'm going to find him. His voice was low, dangerous. I'm going to find him, Anne. No. Shuko grabbed his wrist. Her fingers tightened. Don't do it. Her voice was urgent. It'll only make things worse. Izuku's body stiffened. His fist shook. He was angry. He was furious. He wanted to march right up to Endeavor's mansion, kick down the door, and make him pay for what he had done. But this wasn't about him. It was about Shuko. Izuku forced himself to breathe in, then out. His rationality slowly returned. His hands uncurled, but his voice was firm when he said, Then I'll get strong. Shuko blinked. What? Izuku turned to face her, his green eyes blazing. I swear to you, Shuko. I will get strong enough to protect you. Strong enough to bring the man who killed my mother to justice. His voice trembled. But his resolve did not. I swear it. And then, another voice. I swear it too. Izuku and Shuko both turned. Standing a few feet away, eyes puffy from crying, was Izumi. Her expression was hard, resolute. Is there room for one more? She asked. Before they could answer, she darted forward, wrapping her arms around them both. I missed you too, Shuko. Shuko stiffened at first, then melted into the embrace. Izuku let out a small, choked chuckle. Even if there wasn't room, you'd make your own space, wouldn't you? Izumi smirked. Of course. She pulled back slightly, looking at them both. Her next words sent a chill down Izuku's spine. I'll protect all those I love. No matter the means. No matter the cost. Izuku's breath hitched. Shuko tensed. But before he could say anything, Izumi just smiled, and the storm in her eyes raged on. The silence was suffocating. The twins stood in the center of the living room, staring at their father. No, stepfather, in Izuku's case, with expressions that flickered between shock and disbelief. Izumi's fingers curled into fists, knuckles turning white. Izuku just sat there, frozen. His mind refused to process what he had just heard. Izumi was the first to speak. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. What did you just say? Toshinori's expression was firm, his blue eyes weighed with something deep and heavy, a sorrow neither of them had ever seen before. Still, his voice did not waver. I'm taking Izuku off Dan's martial arts course. He won't be training anymore. Izuku's body locked up, his breath shallow. No, that wasn't right. That couldn't be right. What? Izumi snapped, stepping forward. You can't do that. Toshinori exhaled, rubbing his face. It's too dangerous, he said. I won't risk him getting hurt. But then, how will he become a hero? Izumi protested, desperation creeping into her voice. A crack formed in Izuku's chest. Toshinori's response was swift, merciless. He won't. A hollow, eerie stillness filled the room. Izuku felt something in his stomach drop. Something deep. Something fundamental. Izumi's eyes widened, her lips parting in horror. But our promise. That was a childish promise. Another stab. Izuku's mouth opened. He wanted to scream, to argue, to beg, but the words wouldn't come. The moment shattered when Izuku finally found his voice, low and trembling, but unmistakably sharp. This is because I'm quirkless, isn't it? Toshinori sighed, his shoulders slumping, rubbing his temples as if he was preparing for this argument. It's because you're Inko's son. Izuku shook his head. No, he said, voice stronger now. It is because I'm quirkless. Toshinori's jaw tightened, his face lined with exhaustion. Izuku's hands shook. Izumi is our mother's daughter too. Does that mean you don't care about what happens to her? Toshinori's eyes snapped up, flashing with something almost like anger. No, not anger. Of course I care, he said, voice measured. But Izumi has a powerful quirk. She has the means to protect herself. So it is because I'm quirkless. Izuku's hand slammed against the table, the impact echoing through the room. Toshinori's expression hardened. I am trying to protect you. His voice rose, filling the room, booming with frustration and grief. For the first time in his life, Toshinori Yagi, All Might, the man who could stare down the worst villains in the world without flinching, yelled at Izuku. Izuku's breathing was ragged, his heart hammering against his ribs. Then, Toshinori sighed and reached for the hem of his shirt. Izuku and Izumi both stiffened as he slowly lifted the fabric, revealing the grotesque, jagged scar that stretched across his abdomen. A permanent wound. A reminder of the battle that nearly killed him. Izuku's throat tightened. Izumi winced, looking away. But Toshinori wasn't finished. His voice was quiet, but each word carried weight. This is what villains did to me. His eyes burned into Izuku's. And you saw what happened to your mother. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Izuku could barely breathe. Toshinori exhaled, lowering his shirt. I will keep both of you safe. But for you, Izuku, the path of a hero is not to be. No. Izuku's nails dug into his palms, his body shaking, his stomach twisting into something ugly and hollow. He wanted to yell. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream at his father, to tell him that he had no right to make this decision for him, but Toshinori's voice cut through it all. I will not hear any further discussion on the matter. The finality in his tone was like a door slamming shut. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Izuku stood up. Slowly. Stiffly. His head was bowed, his fists clenched at his sides. He took one shaky breath. Then he turned on his heel and walked out of the room. Not a word spoken. Not a single glance back. Izumi's eyes followed his retreating figure, her face tight with something between shock and fury. And then, she turned to her father. You're right. Toshinori blinked, caught off guard. What? You're right, she repeated, voice steady. Izuku must be kept safe. Toshinori softened, relieved that at least one of them understood. Then Izumi's lips curled into a cold, humorless smile. Which is why I'll stand beside him. Toshinori's relief vanished. Izumi's voice sharpened, eyes blazing. If he can't attend dance classes, then neither will I. And before Toshinori could react, before he could argue, she turned on her heel and followed Izuku, leaving Toshinori alone in the room, staring at the empty space his children left behind. The air in All Might's agency was thick with tension. The four men sat around the conference table, but only one was leaning forward, scowling furiously. You're a fool, Toshinori. Gran Torino's voice cut through the room like a blade, his wrinkled hands slamming against the table. Do you even realize what you've done with your blatant favoritism? All Might, still in his buffed form, kept his hands folded in front of him, eyes downcast. It's not favoritism. Danban exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. That doesn't matter. His voice was calm, but there was disapproval in his sharp eyes. What matters is how it looks to Izuku. You're a hero, Toshinori, but you're also a father. And right now, your son thinks you've abandoned him. All Might flinched. I'm protecting him. His voice was tight. That's my job. No, Night Eye interjected, adjusting his glasses with a cool, calculating gaze. Your job is to guide him. To prepare him. Not to alienate him. Gran Torino shook his head. He's a kid, Toshi. A kid who just lost his mother. You think he'll just accept this? That he'll just sit down and let it go? All Might exhaled, running a hand through his golden hair. Izuku is stubborn, he muttered. Just like me. Just like Inko. He'll keep fighting until it kills him too. His hands curled into fists. And I will not let the last piece of Inko die. Silence. A heavy, unbearable silence. Then, Gran Torino scoffed. The last piece of Inko? Toshinori, listen to yourself. Izuku is not some relic of Inko's memory. He's his own person. All Might's jaw clenched. Night Eye tapped his fingers against the table. You say you won't let your children be taken from you, and yet you still plan to let Izumi become a hero. All Might didn't flinch. Izumi will be safe. Gran Torino scoffed again. Safe? What the hell are you talking about? All Might finally lifted his head. She has a powerful quirk. His voice was calm, as if stating something undeniable. And she will inherit one for all as well. The room erupted. Gran Torino shot to his feet. What? Night Eye's brows snapped together. You're making a decision like that already? Danban's gaze narrowed, but he remained silent, watching. Gran Torino slammed his hand against the table again. Then give it to Izuku, he snapped. There, problem solved. All Might exhaled slowly. It's not that simple. Gran Torino narrowed his eyes. Bullshit. All Might stood, turning toward the large window of his office, his gaze fixed on the sprawling city of Tokyo. His voice was measured, but there was a weight to it that silenced the room. One for All has accumulated an immense amount of energy over the decades. So much so that even I, who have spent years mastering it, can no longer control it completely. He turned back to face them. But Izumi's electrokinetic quirk can manipulate energy. She won't just inherit one for all, she'll be able to wield it far better than I ever could. His expression softened, just for a moment. With both her quirk and one for all, she may not be invincible. But she will be the strongest of them all. Gran Torino collapsed back into his chair, rubbing his forehead. So that's it? You're giving her your power because she's stronger? Because she's the safer bet? All Might didn't answer. Because deep down he knew the answer. Night Eye's gaze hardened. And what about Izuku? All Might's shoulders squared as he looked back out the window. There must always be a symbol of peace. His voice was low, almost like a whisper. But there must also be people to enjoy that peace. No one spoke. No one interrupted. All Might breathed in. I did not spend my life fighting for this ideal just for both my children to continue this never-ending war. One of them must be free of it. One of them must live. His voice dropped. Izuku's talents are better used elsewhere. Danban finally spoke. You mean engineering? All Might nodded. He made a prosthetic arm at the age of 10. He's brilliant, far beyond his years. That is where his future lies. Night Eye's eyes glinted behind his glasses. And if he decides to make weapons for heroes? Or the Quirkless? All Might exhaled. Good. Gran Torino stiffened. You'd be okay with that? All Might's fists tightened. Yes. Let others take up the fight. But not him. His blue eyes hardened, gaze never leaving the city below. It cannot be him. The training room was silent, save for the ragged breathing of Izuku and the steady, controlled breaths of Izumi. Izuku lay flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling, his lungs burning from exertion. Another loss. Boys. He knew the outcome before they even started. Izumi was too fast, too strong, too naturally gifted. Even when she wasn't using her quirk, her body simply moved better, instinctively, effortlessly. It wasn't something she had to fight for, it was just who she was. Izuku, on the other hand, had to fight for everything. He had spent his entire life clawing forward, trying to prove himself, trying to make up for the one thing he didn't have. But no matter how much he studied, how hard he trained, how much he planned, it never felt like enough. Not against his peers at school, who mocked him for daring to dream. Not against his father, who had already given up on him. Not against Izumi, who was holding back, always holding back. And now, it was finally starting to catch up to him. He felt it. That crushing weight. That whisper in his mind, telling him that everyone had already decided his worth. And that maybe they were right. Izumi's hand entered his vision, reaching out to help him up. You okay, Zuku? She asked, voice light as if she hadn't just wiped the floor with him again. Izuku clenched his jaw. I'm fine. He slapped her hand away and pushed himself up on his own. Izumi blinked at him in surprise. Maybe we should stop for today. No. Izuku. Again. Izumi sighed, shaking her head. You're exhausted. I said again. Izumi frowned but relented, shifting back into her stance. Fine. Izuku's mind raced. He had been watching her, studying her patterns, learning her movements. This time he was ready. Izuku lunged, feinting right before cutting left, aiming for her blind spot. For a split second he thought, maybe. But Izumi moved like lightning. She dodged, grabbed his wrist, and before he could blink, thud. Izuku hit the mat. Boys. He squeezed his eyes shut, his fists trembling at his sides. It wasn't fair. She wasn't even using her quirk. This was supposed to be his one advantage. His only advantage. And yet she still won. She always won. Izumi crouched beside him, smirking. I win again. Something in Izuku snapped. Stop holding back. Izumi's smirk vanished. What? Izuku shoved her hand away, pushing himself up onto his knees. I know you're holding back. You always hold back. Izumi's expression tightened. I don't. Yes, you do. His voice cracked. Every time we fight, every time we spar, every time I try to prove myself, you're holding back. Izumi shifted uncomfortably. It's not like that. Then what is it like? She hesitated. And that hesitation, more than anything, confirmed everything. Izuku laughed, short and bitter. You don't trust me. Izumi looked hurt. That's not true. Then why do you treat me like I'm made of glass? She opened her mouth, stopped. Her hands clenched into fists. Because I have to protect you, Izuku. Izuku stilled. His breath hitched. His stomach twisted. She took a step forward, voice gentle, almost pleading. I have to. You're my big brother, but you're also quirkless. I can't let you. Just what? Izuku interrupted, voice cold. Izumi's jaw tightened. She hesitated again. And in that split second, Izuku saw everything. The worry. The pity. The guilt. She didn't believe in him. Not really. She saw him as someone to be protected. Not someone who could stand beside her. Not as an equal. Izuku let out a breathless chuckle. Izumi's face fell. Izuku? I get it now. His voice was flat. She reached out, but he stepped back. Thanks for the match, Izumi. He turned away. But I'm done for today. He walked out of the training room without looking back. Izumi stood there, hands still half raised, eyes wide. She wanted to fix this. She wanted to say something. But the words never came. Because deep down, she knew he was right. She didn't trust him. Not in the way he wanted. And for the first time she realized, maybe she never had. The house was quiet, save for the distant hum of the city outside. The kind of quiet that made everything feel heavier. Izumi's feet dragged against the wooden floor as she made her way to the living room, her mind still reeling from the fight with Izuku earlier. His words kept replaying in her head, over and over. You don't trust me. She scowled. That wasn't true. But why had she hesitated? Why hadn't she just said no? Before she could untangle the knot in her chest, she realized she had reached the living room. Her father, Izumi Yagi, All Might, the symbol of peace, stood in the center, his usual towering form stiff with an unfamiliar tension. For a moment, she barely paid attention, still too wrapped up in everything else. Izumi, her father's voice came, firm yet soft. She blinked, barely registering his words, nodding absent-mindedly. Sit. It wasn't until then that Izumi noticed his expression. There was no trace of his usual warmth. No pride. No light-hearted grin. Only something grim. She sat down. What is this about? All Might sighed, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to find the right words. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you long ago. For the first time, Izumi focused. She sat up, her bitterness giving way to curiosity. My quirk. It isn't originally mine. Izumi blinked. What do you mean? I wasn't born with it, Toshinori admitted. Her breath hitched. You were quirkless? He nodded. Yes. Izumi's stomach twisted. That didn't make sense. Her father, the greatest hero of all time, had once been just like. She swallowed, suddenly uncomfortable. Then how did you? It was passed down to me. He paused, eyes shadowed. By my Mr. Nana Shimura. Izumi's brows furrowed. Passed down? Quirks don't work like that. Most don't, All Might agreed. But this one does. One for All is not just a quirk, it's a legacy. A power built over generations, carried by those who swore to stand against the greatest evil this world has ever known. Izumi leaned forward. What evil? All for One. The name meant nothing to her. She had never heard of it. He was the most dangerous villain in history, All Might continued. For generations he ruled from the shadows, taking quirks, gifting quirks, bending people to his will. Izumi felt a chill run down her spine. But if he was so powerful, why have I never heard of him? The sun hung low in the sky, bathing the park in warm orange hues as the wind rustled softly through the leaves. It was a quiet spot, tucked away from the main roads, away from prying eyes. A place where two people who didn't belong could pretend, if only for a moment, that they did. Izuku sat on the worn-out wooden bench, hunched over, elbows resting on his knees. His fingers dug into his palms as he spoke, frustration lacing every syllable. It's always the same, he muttered. Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, they push me back down. The teachers, my classmates, my own father. His teeth clenched, biting back a growl. Izumi keeps trying to shield me from everything, but she doesn't get it. She never will. Shuko sat beside him, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, gaze focused on the dirt path in front of them. She listened, letting Izuku spill everything he had been holding in. She treats me like I'm made of glass, he scoffed, shaking his head. Like if she lets go for even a second, I'll just break. He exhaled, fingers trembling in his lap. And Dad, he stopped. The word felt wrong on his tongue. Tashinori acts like he's protecting me, but he's just keeping me caged. He's already decided I can't be a hero, that I can't do anything worth a DMN, so why even bother trying? Shuko glanced at him. She could see it, the weight, the exhaustion, the bitterness eating away at him. Izuku had always been smart, always worked harder than anyone she knew, but it didn't matter. Not to them. And the worst part? She understood. She knew what it felt like to be told what you were supposed to be, what you were allowed to be. To be trapped in expectations that you never asked for. She shifted slightly. Have you told them? She asked softly. Izuku let out a humorless laugh. What's the point? They won't listen. To them I'm just weaker. But even when I prove them wrong, they just find some way to push me back down. A moment of silence. Shuko stared at the ground, then at Izuku's clenched fists. She wanted to tell him that it wasn't fair. That he shouldn't have to fight so hard just to be seen. That he deserved better. But the words, the right words, wouldn't come. They never did. Because what could she say? She had spent years learning how to keep quiet, how to be small, how to not be noticed. She had spent years watching, waiting, enduring. She had spent years being told who she was supposed to be. And Izuku. He wasn't like her. He was still fighting. Still trying to prove himself. She wasn't sure if that made him brave or foolish. Maybe both. You're not weak, Izuku, she finally said, her voice quiet but firm. You never were. Izuku stilled. His shoulders tensed, like he wanted to believe her but couldn't. Tell that to them, he muttered. Shuko frowned, hesitating before slowly reaching out, placing her hand over his. I just did. Izuku blinked. Her hand was small, cold, careful. Like someone who had never been given the chance to reach out before. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Izuku exhaled, shoulders loosening just a fraction. Thanks, Shuko. Shuko nodded but said nothing. This wasn't enough, not really. Izuku still had too much to prove, and Izumi was still too afraid of letting him. But maybe they were both wrong. Maybe strength wasn't about proving something. Maybe it wasn't about protecting something either. Maybe it was about understanding. She didn't know yet, but she would figure it out. For him. For herself. For the people who had no place in this world. The rain tapped against the window pane in a slow, rhythmic pattern, the glass like tears sliding down a face. Izuku sat at his desk, his chin resting on his knuckles, phone pressed to his ear as he listened to Melissa's voice on the other end of the line. So I should be able to visit Japan soon. Dad says he has some projects that need collaboration with UA, so I'll finally get to see you guys again. Izuku smiled, the first genuine one he had in a while. That's great, Mel. It's been way too long. I know. Melissa laughed. We have so much to catch up on. Wait, have you decided yet? About UA? Izuku's smile widened as he leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course. UA hero course, no question. I'm going to show everyone that the Quirkless can be heroes too. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not a comfortable one. Then, Melissa spoke, her voice softer now. Hesitant. Izuku, why don't you join the UA support course? Izuku froze. The rain outside seemed to grow louder. What? His voice came out slower than he intended. Support. The best inventors, engineers, and scientists come out of UA's support department. It makes sense for you. Izuku's fingers tightened around his phone. Why would I do that? Melissa, we promised. I know, she interrupted, her voice carrying a quiet resignation. I know we did. But let's be realistic here. Izuku blinked. His heart stuttered in his chest. Realistic. His voice was quieter now. Melissa sighed. You're a genius, Izuku. You're one of the smartest people I know. If you go into the hero course, you'd be wasting your potential. You could be building the future, not throwing yourself into fights you can't win. The words landed like a blow to the gut. Izuku exhaled shakily and forced a smile, even though no one could see it. Did my stepdad put you up to this? No, Melissa said quickly. Too quickly. Izuku said nothing. I've been thinking about it for a while, she admitted. Izuku's grip on his phone loosened slightly as his shoulders relaxed, but only for a moment. I won't be joining UA, Izuku. He sat up straight. What? Or any hero school, she continued. I'm staying on Island to become a scientist. Like my dad. Izuku stared at the rain-streaked window. Melissa hesitated again before speaking. It's just not realistic, Izuku. The words echoed in his head. Realistic. Izuku repeated, disbelief lacing his tone. Melissa, we won a world competition when we were 10. We don't have to be realistic. Izuku, think about it. Even if we got into hero school, then what? His breath hitched. The gap is widening every year, Melissa said softly. More and more powerful quirks are emerging. Every new generation is stronger than the last. And she hesitated, but then she said it. We're stuck. We're stagnant. We're a species being left behind. Izuku felt something cold settle in his chest. We're both people of science, Izuku. This is evolution happening right in front of us. His fingers curled into a fist. We belong to a kind that won't survive in the world of heroes. The best we can do is make the world better in other ways. Help our own people. Help the Quirkless live better lives, because becoming a hero, it won't achieve any of that. She paused. Izuku. Silence. Melissa let out a breath. Just think about it, okay? Another pause. Then softer. It's late here. We'll talk later. The line clicked dead. Izuku didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Melissa's words circled in his head, looping. Over and over. We're a species being left behind. This is evolution. We don't belong in the world of heroes. Izuku's grip on his phone was so tight his knuckles turned white. Melissa, his sister in quirklessness. She had just abandoned him too. The screen flickered. A news broadcast played on a giant LED screen mounted on the side of a towering skyscraper, the city bathed in a sea of neon and steel. Below, the streets of Tokyo hummed with life, thousands of people moving like a living organism, a symphony of footsteps, flashing billboards, and the distant sound of sirens. Today marks the third consecutive year that quirked individuals make up 98% of top national university graduates, reinforcing the growing disparity between quirked and quirkless candidates throughout the professional spectrum. A passing businessman glanced at the screen but didn't stop walking. With the latest research from SEI Armaments confirming that modern quirks are evolving at an unprecedented rate, experts suggest that we may be on the verge of a new era of metahuman capability. The camera cut to a sleek corporate press conference, where a man in a navy suit stood at a podium, his tie immaculate, his expression unreadable. It is an undeniable truth, he stated smoothly, that quirks are no longer a simple mutation, but a true evolutionary leap. The capabilities of the modern quirked individual far surpass those of generations prior. In the coming years, society must adapt. It must evolve. The scene shifted again. A reporter stood at the steps of the Diet building, microphone in hand. Today's proposal by the Metahuman Regulation Committee has sparked controversy as lawmakers debate potential amendments to hero legislation. The bill, if passed, would allow pro-heroes with particularly powerful quirks to enforce the law with increased autonomy, overriding certain jurisdictional limitations in extreme cases. The video cut to a debate in session, an old politician, gray-haired and weary, gripping the podium as he argued. Are we not seeing the slow erosion of accountability? He barked. The very foundation of law is that no one stands above it. If we allow heroes to operate with unchecked authority, where does it end? The camera panned to a younger politician, his voice calmer, colder. Councilman, I respectfully disagree. We live in an age where the strongest among us must be given the means to act efficiently. If we handicap our greatest assets, we handicap society itself. The feed suched again. A nighttime aerial shot of a protest. A sea of people gathered beneath the bright lights of digital billboards. Some held signs, others raised their voices. A chant echoed through the streets. Power to the strong. The weak drag us down. The shot cut to a protester, a man in his mid-20s, a confident grin on his face. It's just facts, man, he said, shrugging. Quirks are the future. Quirkless people can't keep up. They expect to be treated as equals when they contribute nothing? That's just dead weight. Another SWCH. A talk show, a polished host sitting across from a sharply dressed analyst. But what about those who argue that quirkless individuals are being left behind? The host prompted, leaning forward. The analyst smirked. Left behind, he echoed. Look, I sympathize, really. But life isn't fair. It's not about being left behind, it's about keeping up. The world is changing. The strong will rise, and the rest will simply have to adapt. A final cut. A home security camera feed. Blurry. Grainy. A narrow alley, a dimly lit street. Two figures, a teenage boy, unarmed, backing away as three older teens with glowing hands closed in. Come on, man, one of them taunted, sparking flames between his fingers. You should be flattered we're even talking to you. You guys are like, what, an endangered species now. A punch. A body hitting the pavement. The video feed froze. And then, darkness. The city pulsed on, oblivious. The world kept turning, evolving, shifting. And those who couldn't keep up were being left behind. The classroom was buzzing with anticipation. The air felt thick with excitement as the students of Aldra Middle School sat in their seats, barely containing their energy. The teacher, a lanky, middle-aged man with thinning hair, smirked as he waved a handful of papers in front of the class. All right, settle down, he said, though he made no attempt to actually enforce it. As you all know, in a few months, you'll be taking your aptitude exams to decide what high school you'll be applying to. But come on, he chuckled, we all know you guys want to be heroes, anyway. The students erupted into cheers as the teacher flung the papers into the air, letting them flutter down like confetti. Some students even flared their quirks in excitement. A boy at the back of the class ignited sparks from his fingers, a girl with bird-like wings flapped them in delight, and another student levitated their chair slightly off the ground. Even Izumi joined in, sending tiny arcs of golden electricity crackling between her fingers as her usual crowd of admirers, mostly girls, though a few boys lurked nearby, gushed over her. Izumi-chan, you're so cool. You're totally gonna be the next symbol of peace. You have to go to UA, right? You'd be a shoo-in. Izumi laughed sheepishly, shrugging as she rubbed the back of her neck. I guess? It's the best school, right? Among the noise, two voices stood out. The absence of their enthusiasm was just as noticeable as the loudest cheers. Bakugo, reclined in his chair, feet propped up on his desk, arms crossed over his chest, a familiar cocky smirk tugged at Bakugo's lips. Izuku leaned back in his chair, arms folded, staring at the chaos with bored disinterest. Then came the voice that cut through the celebration like a sharp knife. Huh? You extras actually think you got what it takes? Bakugo's lazy drawl echoed through the classroom, silencing several students. Let's be real here, all of you are just stepping stones on my way to the top. There's no point in getting excited when none of you stand a chance. His lackeys snickered, while the rest of the class exchanged uncertain glances. Then, someone snorted. Oh please. We all know Izumi could take you on. The entire class turned to look at her. Izumi blinked. Bakugo's smirk twitched. A vein pulsed in his forehead. The laughter in the class escalated as the idea of Izumi beating Bakugo took hold. Izumi shrugged. Well, I dunno about that. Like hell she could. Bakugo snapped, standing up from his chair, sparks crackling from his palms. Oh, come on, another boy snickered. We've all seen them train, and let's be real, she's stronger than you. More laughter. Bakugo's entire body stiffened. His fingers twitched. He could already hear the whispers, the murmurs, the doubt. What about you, Midoriya? Izuku blinked. The teacher was looking at him now. You probably won't be heading into the hero track, huh? Maybe you'll become a professional science fair winner instead. Laughter. Izuku exhaled slowly through his nose, expression unreadable. He tilted his head slightly, resting it against his palm, and then, "Actually," he said evenly, "I'll be applying for the UA hero course." Silence. For just a few seconds, the entire class seemed to freeze. Then, laughter again. "What? In the hero course? You're joking, right?" Even Izumi sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Something in her chest ached. But her thoughts were interrupted. Boom. Izuku's desk shook violently as an explosion erupted across it, the heat liking at his skin. A hand slammed down on his desk, smoke curling between the fingers. Bakugo was looming over him. His red eyes burned. "You think," Bakugo said softly, dangerously, "you get to stand on the same stage as me?" Izuku stared back. Unflinching. Unmoved. The tension in the room was thick. Back off. Izumi's voice was cold, her presence electric. Bakugo hesitated for only a second, then scoffed, pulling back. "Whatever. Waste of my time." But as he walked away, Izuku's knuckles remained white from how tightly he was gripping the desk. The school day ended. The students shuffled out. Izumi was held up by some of her classmates, surrounded by admirers. Which meant, "Oi, Deku!" Izuku didn't turn. Bakugo was behind him, his goons flanking either side. "We're not done yet." Izuku exhaled slowly, stuffing his things into his bag. "What do you want, Kaken?" Bakugo clicked his tongue. "Have you seen the news lately?" he asked casually. "That quirkless loser who got jumped in an alley a few days ago?" Izuku froze. Bakugo leaned closer, voice mocking. "Would be a real shame if the same thing happened to you." Izuku clenched his fists. Then again, Bakugo grinned, "Not really. You and the rest of your kind should just go ahead and disappear." His lackeys laughed. "You're a disgrace to your family. Bet Auntie Inko is rolling in her grave at how disappointing you are." Something snapped. Izuku moved. Too quickly. The next thing he knew, his hand was around Bakugo's throat. Bakugo choked. Izuku had never realized how fragile a throat could be. How easy it would be. Just one good move. Just one. "Midoriya. Katsuki." The teacher's voice. Izuku's fingers tensed. The threat. Not to Bakugo. To him. They never did anything to Bakugo. They never did. Izuku's jaw clenched, then he released his grip. Bakugo collapsed to the floor, coughing, scrambling backward. Then, a hand on his shoulder. "Izumi." Her eyes cold. "Choose your next actions carefully." Bakugo gritted his teeth and swatted her hand away. Then he ran. His lackeys followed. Izumi sighed. "They're not worth it. Let's just go." Izuku didn't respond. He stared at his hands. The same hands that had just been wrapped around a throat. The journey home had never been so quiet. A few years ago, they would have been laughing, chattering about their day, making fun of their teachers, or debating the latest hero rankings. They would have raced home, pushing and pulling at each other, arguing about who was the fastest. Now it was just silence. The only sounds were their footsteps against the pavement and the distant hum of the city. The neon lights of Mizudafu flickered above them, but neither of them looked up to admire them. The streets felt emptier than usual. Izumi walked beside him, glancing at her brother from the corner of her eye. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders tense, his head tilted downward, as if he was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. She breathed in. "So, you're serious about applying to UA's hero course?" Izuku didn't even look at her. "Are you going to tell me how bad of an idea it is?" he said flatly, his tone unreadable. Izumi flinched. "Are you going to tell me," Izuku continued, voice steady but sharp, "how my talents would be better used elsewhere?" She wanted to tell him the opposite. "Be a hero. Train with me. Let's be together again." But the words never left her mouth. They stuck in her throat like poison. So instead, she swallowed them down and said, "It's dangerous." Izuku stopped walking. Izumi's voice faltered. What happened to Mom could. Izuku's head snapped toward her. It could also happen to you, he shot back. Izumi stiffened. And yet, Izuku continued, you're still willing to be a hero. Silence hung between them. And so am I. Izumi opened her mouth, but he didn't let her speak. What will it take, Izuku's voice rose, for anyone to believe in me? Izumi flinched. Melissa doesn't believe in me. Dad doesn't believe in me. No one does. His voice cracked, breath coming in short bursts. His fists clenched at his sides. Why won't anyone just? Izuku's words were cut off as Izumi moved too fast. Before he could react, she grabbed him and pushed him against the wall. The air rushed out of his lungs. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His mind blanked. He struggled, tried to push back, tried to use techniques from years of training, but he couldn't fight her off. Not even close. Izumi's grip was unyielding. Her hands dug into his shoulders. Izuku stared at his sister, stunned. I needed you to see, Izumi said quietly. Her violet eyes were heavy with something dark, something painful. There are people out there stronger than me. Stronger than you can even imagine. People who wouldn't have hesitated to hurt you just now. Izumi released him. Izuku collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, hands pressing against the cold pavement. Izumi took a step back, watching him, her expression strained. I'm doing this for your protection, Izuku. For your own good. Izuku's breath was uneven. You can still help people. Izumi smiled as if offering him an olive branch. Join the support course. You're a genius, way smarter than me. You could become my assistant. We could still save the world together. The alley was eerily quiet, save for the steady hum of police radios and the soft crunch of boots on debris-littered pavement. Detective Tsukachi stepped into the chaotic scene, his eyes scanning every inch of the alleyway. The smell of iron filled the air, mingling with something far worse. Tsukachi's face was grim as he surveyed the mess before him. This is a bloodbath, he muttered under his breath, stepping carefully over the remnants of violence. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, the ground, pooled beneath the debris. Whatever had happened here had been brutal. Too brutal for typical criminal behavior. This wasn't just a mugging gone wrong. This was pure destruction. Detective, one of his officers called out, his voice tight with concern. Tsukachi turned and saw the officer pointing toward a dark corner of the alley. A chill ran through the detective's spine. He followed the officer's gaze, squinting into the dimness, and his heart sank. In the corner, half obscured by a heap of discarded trash, lay what appeared to be a hand. Bloodied and torn. The sleeve of a school uniform clung to it, stained dark with blood. Tsukachi's stomach tightened. No, he whispered, taking cautious steps forward, his gloved hands reaching out as he carefully examined the scene. He noted the hand was no longer attached to its owner. No, it was an arm now, severed at the shoulder. It had been ripped apart. His eyes traced the sleeve. He recognized it immediately. The fabric, the design, it was a student's uniform. The realization sent a cold shudder down his spine. It's a child, Tsukachi said, the words falling from his lips like a death sentence. He stood frozen for a moment, breathing in sharply. A child, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His mind raced, the image of a harmed child flashing behind his eyes. Who could do something so horrendous? Turning back to his officers, Tsukachi's voice dropped, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on his shoulders. Get all the schools in the area on the line, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside. Radio to all the schools. Have them contact the parents, find out if any kids are missing. Paused, his eyes narrowing as he looked around the scene again. The sludge monster was still at large, lurking in the shadows of the city. If it hadn't harmed this child already, it certainly wouldn't hesitate to strike again. One of his officers scrambled to relay the orders, but Tsukachi stayed focused. His eyes lingered on the severed arm, and his heart sank further as the realization began to settle like a weight in his chest. A child. It was a child. As his officers continued their work, Tsukachi couldn't shake the image of that school uniform from his mind. It was a uniform he had seen on too many faces, faces he had seen in the schoolyards, in the classrooms. For a moment, the weight of what had just happened, the raw violence, the brutality, hit him with the force of a blow. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. In the distance, the sound of sirens grew louder as more units began to arrive. But Tsukachi knew that no matter how many heroes rushed to the scene, nothing would bring this child back. Nothing would undo the horror that had been done. The streets of Mizudafu felt quieter than ever now. The sirens wailed, but they felt so far away from what was happening right in front of him. What had been lost? And as Tsukachi stood there in the alley, he couldn't help but wonder if they were too late to stop the things that were truly coming. Izumi sat at the dinner table, her hands gripping the edge of her plate. Her food had gone cold, but she hadn't taken a single bite. It didn't matter. Nothing did. Not after what he said. "You're no sister to me." Those words kept repeating in her head. No sister? She bit the inside of her cheek, her fingernails digging into her palms. Fine. If that's what he thinks, then so be it. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the quiet clinking of plates as Toshinori moved around in the kitchen. Eventually, he emerged, carrying the rest of dinner. He glanced around the table before frowning. "Izumi, where's your brother?" Izumi shrugged, keeping her gaze locked on her plate. "It's getting late," Toshinori continued, checking his watch. "He should have been home by now." Izumi said nothing. "Do you have any idea where he might be?" Still, she didn't answer. She could feel her father's eyes on her. His voice softened. "I don't know what happened between you two, but he's still your brother." Izumi gritted her teeth. "And unlike you, he doesn't have a quirk to fight back if something happens." That made her snap. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Tell that to him." Toshinori sighed, running a tired hand down his face. It was clear he wanted to argue, but the ringing of the house phone interrupted him. With an exasperated look, he turned and walked off to answer it. Izumi let out a slow breath, trying to push away the frustration gnawing at her insides. Maybe this will teach him a lesson. Maybe he needs to run into a villain he can't handle. Maybe then he'll realize that. Crush. She jolted at the sudden noise. Her head snapped up, eyes widening. The sound had come from the other room. Her stomach twisted. "Dad?" she called, standing up. Silence. Her heartbeat quickened. She stepped away from the table and turned the corner, only to freeze. Toshinori was standing there, his back against the wall, the phone gripped so tightly in his hand that his knuckles had gone white. At his feet lay a shattered vase, water spilling onto the floor, petals from the broken flowers floating in the mess. "Dad?" Izumi said again, her voice cracking. "What happened?" Toshinori didn't respond at first. He simply stared blankly ahead, his face pale, his expression unreadable. But when he turned toward her, she saw it. The fear. The devastation. His lips parted, but the words wouldn't come out. "Izuku." Izumi felt her stomach drop. Her blood ran cold. "What about Izuku?" she demanded, stepping closer. Toshinori swallowed thickly, struggling to get the words out. Then, finally, his voice, broken and raw, whispered, "He's missing." Izumi's breath caught in her throat. "What?" "There was an attack." Toshinori's voice was trembling. "A villain. There was so much blood. And they found his arm." Izumi didn't hear the rest. Everything around her became distant, muted, like she had been plunged underwater. Her brain refused to process the words. Her heart pounded in her ears. "Izuku? Missing?" Her knees wobbled, threatening to give out. That's not funny." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me you're joking." Toshinori didn't answer. Because he wasn't. Izumi shook her head, stepping back. No, you're wrong. He's probably just being stubborn. He's fine." "He's fine, right?" Toshinori looked like he wanted to say something, but he just closed his eyes, his face twisting with pain. The silence was louder than any words could have been. Izuku was gone. Izumi stumbled backward, her hands trembling, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. Izuku was gone. She felt suffocated. He was gone. A sob tried to claw its way up her throat, but she swallowed it down. No, this isn't real. This isn't happening. He was her brother. Her stupid, reckless, infuriating brother. The last thing she had said to him was, "Fine. When you die, I won't cry for you." Izumi's vision blurred. She didn't even realize she had collapsed to her knees until Toshinori crouched beside her, gripping her shoulders, his own face pale with grief. She should have stopped him. She should have forced him to stay. But she didn't. And now, Izuku was gone. The city was quiet. Too quiet. The usual sounds, the distant honk of a car, the chatter of late-night workers heading home, the faint hum of electricity in the streetlights, felt muted, like the world had lost its color. Like it was holding its breath. Izumi walked alone. Her footsteps splashed against the wet pavement, the rain soaking into her clothes, but she barely felt it. The cold bit at her skin, but she hardly noticed. Her legs ached, but she kept moving. He can't be gone. She had been walking for hours. Down the empty streets, through alleys, past flickering neon signs that barely cast any warmth in the darkness. She checked everywhere. Places he liked to go. Places they had been as kids. But there was nothing. No sign of him. No sign that he had ever been here at all. Her heart pounded, but not from the exertion. From the fear clawing at her insides, the panic she tried to keep buried under the rain and the dark and the hopelessness. "Where are you, Izuku?" she whispered, her breath hitching as she pressed forward. She had no plan, no direction, just an aching, desperate need to find him. Because this isn't how it ends. It can't be how it ends. That fight, that stupid, senseless fight, those can't be the last words they ever say to each other. Those can't be the last memories they leave behind. "Then I won't cry for you." The words felt like shards of glass in her throat now. Because she had promised. She had promised she wouldn't cry. And yet, the rain wasn't the only thing pouring that night. Izumi's vision blurred, her chest tightening until she could barely breathe. She wasn't supposed to cry. She wasn't supposed to mourn him. She wasn't supposed to feel like this. But she did. She gritted her teeth, fists clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. She didn't care. The night stretched on. Her body was running on fumes, but her legs refused to stop. She wouldn't stop. Not until she found something, anything, that told her he was still here. Still alive. Still breathing. But as the night dragged on and her calls for him were swallowed by the empty streets, a realization crept into her mind. There was nothing. No footsteps in the puddles. No discarded notebooks. No familiar muttering under his breath as he overanalyzed the world around him. There was just her. Alone. And then it hit her. A choking, hollow pain that slammed into her so suddenly, so violently, that it stole the air from her lungs. He really was gone. Izumi stopped walking. Her knees buckled. She barely noticed when she hit the pavement, barely felt the icy water soak through her breathes. She just sat there, staring blankly at the empty street ahead, her hands trembling in her lap. Her mind refused to accept it. But her heart knew. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew. And the weight of it, of everything, was crushing. Izuku, her brother. Gone. She tipped her head back, letting the rain hit her face as her breath shook. And even though she swore she wouldn't cry, the sob ripped from her throat before she could stop it. The station was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights above did little to cut through the oppressive silence that had settled between them. The room was cold, unfeeling, like the world itself had frozen in anticipation of the inevitable. Izumi sat next to Toshinori, her hands clenched into fists. She could still hear the rain from outside, the slow, steady drip of water against the window pane. It was mocking her. The whole world was mocking her. She wanted to scream. Toshinori sat beside her, his shoulders tense, his face unreadable. But Izumi could see the cracks. His fingers twitched against his knee, his breathing was just a bit too shallow, and his gaze was hollow, a man bracing for the worst. He already knew. They both did. But that didn't make this any easier. The door creaked open. Izumi barely looked up as Detective Tsukachi stepped inside, his usual firm demeanor replaced by something heavier. Something broken. She had known him all her life, her father's closest friend, someone who had watched her and Izuku grow up. But today, he looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. Toshinori straightened in his seat. Naomasa, he greeted, voice low, tired. Tsukachi didn't respond right away. His hands were shaking. That was the first thing Izumi noticed. The folder in his grip was trembling just slightly, and his expression, God, his expression, he swallowed, his throat bobbing as if trying to force the words out. The words that would destroy them. The results just came in, he said finally, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. We confirmed the DNA match. The pause. A sharp, horrible, devastating pause. And then, it's Izuku. It was strange how silence could feel so loud. Something inside her shattered. Toshinori exhaled sharply, like all the air had been ripped from his lungs. His shoulders sagged, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked defeated. A man who had fought battles beyond counting, who had stood against the greatest evil the world had ever known. And yet, in this moment, he looked powerless. Izumi couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her ears were ringing, her vision blurred, and all she could hear was that one sentence repeating over and over in her head. It's Izuku. Her brother. Her brother was dead. Her body shook. Her mind raced, desperately grasping at something, anything that could make this make sense. No, it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Izuku was stubborn, he was resilient, he had always found a way. He wasn't weak. He wouldn't just die. But the world didn't care. The universe didn't care. The evidence was in Tsukachi's trembling hands. Cold, unforgiving. Everything Izumi and Toshinori had done. Everything they had sacrificed. Everything they had broken in the name of protecting him. All of it. For nothing. She wanted to scream. She wanted to punch the wall until her knuckles bled. She wanted to run out into the night and keep looking, keep searching, because maybe, just maybe, if she looked hard enough, she would find him. Alive. But there was no point. Because Izuku was gone. And she never got to say sorry. She never got to tell him she loved him one last time. And now she never would. Her fingers dug into her thighs. Toshinori's breathing was shallow beside her, his massive form still, locked in some kind of quiet torment. And Tsukachi. Tsukachi looked like he hated himself. He cleared his throat, looking away, his hands tightening into fists as he spoke again. There will be an official statement later. But I wanted to tell you personally first. His voice was rough, broken. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Toshinori nodded stiffly, as if in a daze, but Izumi couldn't move. She couldn't feel anything. Just an overwhelming, suffocating void where her heart used to be. Her vision swam as she stared down at her lap. Izuku was dead. And the worst part? It was all her fault. The sky was gray and heavy, as if the world itself was mourning. Raindrops tapped against the canopy of umbrellas, a rhythmic, hollow sound that filled the silence of the cemetery. The air was thick with grief, the kind that settles into the bones and refuses to leave. Izumi sat next to the empty casket. There was no body, no one to lay to rest. Just a box of memories. And an arm. An arm. Her brother's severed arm. That's all they had left of Izuku Yagi. Izumi's fingers twitched as she clenched them in her lap, her nails digging into her palms. She should be crying, but her eyes were dry. Her heart was too full of something else. Something ugly. Hatred. Not at the villain who had taken him. No, he was just a symptom. A disease allowed to fester. Her hatred was for them. The ones who came and spoke empty words. I'm so sorry for your loss, All Might. He was a brilliant boy, such a shame. If only a pro had been there sooner. If only we had known. The word echoed in her mind like a cruel joke. They knew. Every single one of them. They all saw how Izuku was treated. How he was shoved aside, mocked, ignored, told time and time again that he was nothing. And now? Now they mourned him? Now they stood here, heads bowed, dressed in black, pretending to care? She wanted to laugh. Or scream. Or burn this entire funeral down. Instead, she sat there, silent, gripping her hands so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her father, Toshinori Yagi, the indomitable symbol of peace, stood tall in his all-might form. But Izumi knew better. He was struggling. She could see the tremble in his muscles, the way his breathing was uneven. He had been holding this form for far too long. He wanted to make it through the service. He wanted to be strong for everyone else. For Izuku. For me. But what's the point? What's the point of heroes if they can't even protect the people who need them most? Izumi's eyes flickered over the crowd. They were all there. The greatest heroes of their generation. Endeavor. Pox. Ryukyu. Best Genist. Where were they that night? Where were they when Izuku was screaming? Where were they when he was fighting for his life? Where were they when he was suffering all these years? The answer was simple. They didn't care. Not about him. Not about the weak. That was the truth of this world. Heroes only cared about who was worth saving. And Izuku Yagi had never been worth saving. Izumi exhaled shakily, her rage twisting into something colder, sharper, more certain. She remembered when she was 10 years old, standing beside her brother and Melissa on island watching. As they worked on their project for the engineering Olympiad. Izuku was so small back then. But his eyes were always so bright. So full of hope. Melissa, look at this, he had said, practically bouncing on his heels as he pointed to the blueprints. If we adjust the output here and recalibrate the sensors, we can increase efficiency by 14%. Melissa had grinned, his partner in all things, and ruffled his hair. I knew you'd find a way to improve it. He had been so happy back then. So sure that he could prove them all wrong. But the world crushed him before he ever got the chance. Izumi inhaled sharply, pulling herself from the memory. She turned her gaze back to the heroes in front of her. She had spent so long believing that heroes were meant to protect everyone. That they were supposed to be pillars of strength, the kind of people who would never abandon the weak. But they had abandoned Izuku. Because he was weak. Because he had no quirk. Her hands clenched. They shouldn't have left him to die. That wasn't what heroes were supposed to do. Heroes are supposed to protect the weak. But maybe the weak weren't meant to stand among them. Maybe the weak needed to be protected in a different way. Izumi's jaw tightened. Izuku had spent so long fighting to prove that he wasn't weak. That he didn't need her protection. That he could be a hero. But he was weak. She hadn't wanted to see it, but she saw it now. Izuku never should have been out there. He should have been safe. Sheltered. Protected from a world that would never accept him. Heroes couldn't protect people like Izuku. But she could. Izumi would. She looked at the empty casket, her heart like cold steel in her chest. This world needed to change. The weak should never be put in danger. If the heroes wouldn't change, then she would force them to. Because she was strong. And she would never let someone like Izuku die again. A hand on her shoulder. Izumi stiffened. For a moment, her rage blurred everything. The funeral, the heroes, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest. But then she saw the sad, familiar smile. Shuko. Izumi felt the tension in her shoulders lessen, but she didn't know what to say. What could she say? Because here, standing before her, was someone who had truly believed in Izuku. Someone who, unlike the rest of them, had never doubted him. Not once. Not like the heroes. Not like her. And yet, words weren't needed. Shuko simply pulled her into a hug. Izumi stiffened for a second, feeling her body tremble. The tears refused to come. But Shuko held her tighter. And then they did. She gripped Shuko's jacket like a lifeline, her breath shuddering, her vision blurred. Izumi Yagi, strong, unbreakable, untouchable, was crumbling. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent but endless. She didn't sob. She didn't wail. But the tears wouldn't stop. For a few minutes, they stayed like that. Two children who had lost something irreplaceable. Then, finally, Izumi spoke. I will avenge him. Shuko pulled back, her eyes widening slightly. Izumi's fists clenched at her sides. I will make a world where he could have lived without worry. Shuko looked at her, taking in the steel in her words, the unwavering certainty in her voice. Then she nodded, her lips pressing into a thin, sad smile. A world where he could have been what he wanted to be. A third voice cut through their quiet. A world for all the people like him. And me. Both girls turned sharply. Standing there, hands clasped in front of her, was Melissa Shield. Her blonde hair was damp from the misty rain, her blue eyes filled with grief, but there was something else there too. Something resolute. Izumi felt something ease in her chest. "I'm glad you could come," she murmured, stepping forward. Melissa smiled, small and broken. "I had to," she said, turning toward the casket. "I needed to say goodbye." She stepped forward, placing her hand on the smooth, polished surface of the coffin. She breathed in. Then, finally, she exhaled and turned to Shuko. "I don't think we've met." She extended a hand. "Melissa Shield." Shuko took it gently. "Shuko Todoroki." Melissa nodded, smiling slightly. Then, finally, she turned to Izumi. "It seems," she said softly, "that we all agree." The rain dripped from the trees. The funeral continued around them, but in this moment, nothing else existed. Only them. Only the promise they were about to make. Melissa's fingers curled into a fist. "This world," she said, "must change." And there it was. 3 girls. 3 beliefs. 3 different paths. But at their core they shared the same wound. And so, unknowingly, they stood at the beginning of something greater than themselves. A storm brewing. A revolution waiting to unfold. And a promise that, no matter what it took, this world would never be the same again. The funeral home's resting room was quiet. Muted voices drifted from the main hall, the weight of mourning pressing down on everything. Izumi sat stiffly in one of the worn-out chairs, arms crossed, fingers gripping her sleeves tightly. She hated this place. The walls, the dim lighting, the whispering of people who had no right to whisper about him. Shuko and Melissa sat beside her, each lost in their own thoughts. Melissa, ever the composed one, had her hands neatly folded on her lap, eyes distant. She was thinking, analyzing, planning. Because Melissa always had a plan, and whatever it was, Izumi knew it wouldn't involve just sitting idly by. Shuko, on the other hand, was still. Too still. Staring blankly at the floor, as if she were trying to shrink herself out of existence. Izumi exhaled sharply, trying to keep herself grounded. Then, her breath hitched. Something caught her eye. A flash of blonde. Spiky, unruly hair. Her body moved before she could think. A hand gripping a shoulder. A yank. A sharp, snarling growl. "How dare you?" Bakugo turned, startled. His red eyes widened in shock, but Izumi didn't care. She didn't care about his reaction. She didn't care that the room had gone silent. She didn't care that her own hands were shaking with rage. She didn't care. Because all she could see was him. Standing there like he had the right to be here. Like he deserved to mourn Izuku. Like he wasn't the one who. "How dare you show up here and pretend you care?" Bakugo opened his mouth, but she didn't let him speak. She wouldn't let him. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Her voice trembled with rage. "This is what you told him should happen." Bakugo's lips parted slightly, but he didn't say a word. His face was unreadable. Izumi's nails dug into her palms. "You said he should die." A breath. "Well, guess what, Katsuki?" The words tumbled from her mouth like poison. "He's dead." Silence. "And he's not coming back." Bakugo's jaw clenched. But still he said nothing. "So tell me," Izumi's voice cracked, raw with something that wasn't just anger, wasn't just grief. "Are you happy now? Are you finally happy now?" She wanted to hit him. No, she wanted to break him. To unleash all of the pain, the hatred, the helplessness. Her fingers twitched. The air around her crackled. Electricity danced at her fingertips, the static crawling up her arms. And then, a hand on her wrist. Then another. "Shuko." "Melissa." "Izumi," Melissa whispered. Izumi tensed. "It's not worth it," Shuko murmured. Izumi's breath hitched. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. She wanted, but she couldn't. Her hands curled into fists. She exhaled sharply, the crackling energy dissipating into the air. Not here. Not now. She turned away. But before she left, before she forced herself to walk past him without breaking down, she glanced over her shoulder. And with nothing but venom in her voice, she spat out, "Go away." Then she left. Shuko and Melissa followed. The three of them walking away together. Leaving Bakugo standing there. Alone. Silent. His fists clenched. His jaw locked. His breath uneven. He watched them go. And then he looked at the empty casket. His throat felt tight. His palms sweaty. And he could only wonder, was this really what he had wanted? The words "he should die" echoed in his head like a curse. Even if it wasn't, it was too late to turn back now. His eyes burned. His nails dug into his palm. His breath hitched. This is why the Quirkless should stay away. The three of them walked through the dimly lit corridors of the funeral home, the air thick with the scent of lilies and incense. Melissa walked slightly ahead, arms crossed, a storm brewing beneath her otherwise calm expression. Izumi, still seething, clenched and unclenched her fists, electricity barely contained beneath her skin. "I can't believe that he had the nerve to show his face here," Izumi snarled. "Like he cares about Izuku. He's the one who told him to go die." Melissa hummed, her fingers twitching. "Who was that?" she asked, voice carefully neutral, but there was a sharpness beneath her words. Shuko sighed, her posture shrinking ever so slightly. "We used to be friends," she murmured, voice quiet but clear. "All of us, me, Izumi, Izuku and Kaken. But when Katsuki got his quirk and Izuku didn't." She trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. Melissa's jaw tightened, her fingers curling against her arms. They all knew what happened next. The torment, the threats, the quiet suffering, the long years of being told he didn't belong. Izumi scoffed. "That JRK. He's probably just here so people don't think he's a total monster." Then, a voice interrupted, cool, detached, emotionless. It made Shuko shrink. "Bakugo never had much tact," the voice mused. "I suppose that hasn't changed over the years." Melissa turned around first, and there stood a boy, a perfect mirror of Shuko, except he lacked the scar. Shoto Todoroki. Shuko flinched, her arms curling around herself as if trying to disappear. Izumi turned as well, her scowl lessening slightly. "Shoto," she said, surprised. "It's been a while." "That it has," Shoto replied, his tone flat and indifferent. His eyes flickered toward the three of them, unreadable. "But pleasantries can be exchanged later. I've come to get my sister." Shuko's fingers twitched. Melissa's eyes darted toward her, catching the barely concealed tension in her posture. "We've barely been here," Izumi said, narrowing her eyes. "Why rush off now?" Shoto sighed as if speaking to a child. "Father says it's time to go." Shuko shrank even further. The air felt colder. Melissa's lips pressed into a thin line. Izumi's scowl returned with full force. "What does your father care?" Izumi spat. "You just arrived and we're here to mourn Izuku." Shoto barely reacted, his gaze blank and uncaring. "There is no purpose in spending so much time mourning someone who died because he was weak." The words cut deep. Izumi stiffened, her hands sparking dangerously. Shuko grabbed her wrist, her touch light and pleading. "It's not worth it," she whispered. Izumi's breath came in short, sharp bursts. She could kill him for saying that. She wanted to. But the way Shuko's fingers trembled against her wrist was enough to make her stop. Just barely. Shoto remained unfazed. "It's the truth," he said simply. "However, we were friends once, and I can acknowledge his intelligence. So I came to pay my respects." His eyes flickered toward the casket, and for the briefest moment, there was something there, not sorrow, not regret, but something colder, something that looked too much like pity. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Shoto turned on his heel, hands in his pockets. "Now that I've done that, there's no purpose in staying." Shuko sighed. Izumi grit her teeth. Melissa watched everything. Something shifted in the void. It had been a lifetime, an eternity. Time collapsed in on itself like a dying star. There was no before, no after, only the drifting, the endless, suffocating drifting. His consciousness, once a glowing spark of defiance, had been stripped bare by silence and pain. But still, something clawed, a desperate flicker of mind clawing its way up through the sludge of thought and trauma. Memory. Not linear, not neat. It hit him like bullets. A birthday cake with green frosting, the laughter of a girl with red and white hair, his mother's arms around him, warm and safe, the tingle of a wrench in his hand, the promise he made, the promise they broke, the promise he would keep. And then, the grave, the casket, the classroom of jeering faces, Bakugo's words, "Why don't you just die already?" His mother's blood on concrete, his father's voice saying no, his sister's strength crushing him under its weight. All of them turned their backs, and the world, this rotted, cork-drunk, hypocritical world, just kept spinning. He remembered the pain, the monster, the rip, the tear, the scream. He remembered dying. And then, a voice calm and powerful, "Do not worry, child. I am here." He remembered that. His mind latched onto the sound like a starving man to water. Who was he? What did he want? Why save him? A chorus of answers buzzed like flies in the back of his skull, all contradictory, all incomplete. With a lurch, his soul slammed into his body. Two glowing green eyes snapped open. Agony. Unfathomable, all-consuming agony. It burned everywhere. His flesh, his bones, his nerves, each screaming their own symphony of torment. He tried to gasp, but air wouldn't come. Instead, machines hissed, breathing for him. A thick plastic respirator was jammed into his mouth and nose. Tubes slithered from his chest to machines humming beside the bed. He blinked once, twice. He couldn't move, only twitch. His fingers, only the ones on the left hand, responded. The right was gone. Not numb. Not injured. Gone. A piece of him stolen, like a puzzle with no corner. His gaze flickered around the dim chamber, metallic walls, blinking lights, cables, and no windows. This wasn't a hospital. This was a tomb. His memory skittered again to a figure, tall, imposing, regal. Not the sludge creature, not the doctor. Something else. Someone else. Not a hero. Not quite a man. Then, the door creaked open. Footsteps echoed, too light to be his rescuer. A round man waddled into the room, wearing a pristine white coat, a ludicrous mustache, and circular green goggles that glinted under the sterile light. He smiled wide. "You're awake," he exclaimed, as if greeting a guest at a dinner party. "I was beginning to think you'd never return to us. Weeks you've been under, young man. Weeks. But look at you, still hanging in there. Remarkable." Izuku's eyes narrowed. He couldn't speak. The doctor leaned in, inspecting his vitals on a nearby machine with theatrical satisfaction. "Oh, don't worry. You're in safe hands now. The safest. The MSTO was very clear. You were to be spared no resource, no effort. And here you are." The word just chilled him. "Who is the MSR?" Izuku tried to ask, but only a garbled hiss escaped the respirator. The man chuckled. All in due time. No need to strain yourself." "Oh." He clapped his gloved hands together. "Right. You'll be wanting to communicate." He lifted it. Small device and placed it near Izuku's twitching left fingers. A touchscreen blinked to life with a soft ping. "This pad here will translate Morse code in real time. Tap with your fingers, dash, dash, and voila. Communication." The doctor's smile widened, almost malicious in its cheerfulness. "And if you don't know Morse, well, you've got plenty of time to learn." He turned on his heel and made for the exit. "Rest up, Izuku Yagi." Should I say Midoriya now?" Izuku flinched. The door shut. Silence. Only the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor remained. And the soft, steady hiss of the machine breathing for him. He was alone. Alone in the dark. He tried to cry, but there were no tears. Tried to scream, but no voice. All he could do was think. And so he did. This world. It chewed him up. Spat him out. Stripped him bare. Everyone said they loved him. Everyone said they wanted to protect him. And they left him here. He would rise. He would build himself from pieces. Stronger. Smarter. Unburdened by morality, expectation, or naivete. And when he walked again, the world would know. It didn't kill him. It made something worse. The night air was thick. Heavy with smog. Wet with rain. Coated in silence that wasn't silence. Sirens in the distance, the low hum of neon, the murmur of a city that had stopped caring a long time ago. Izumi Yagi stood atop a concrete gargoyle, a ghost in black. The wind pulled at her coat, her hair crackling with static. Sparks danced across her fingertips in elegant little pirouettes, waiting to be loosed. Her breathing was calm, measured, but her eyes, they burned. From this height, Mizudafu looked like a slow-motion fire. So many windows. So many lives. So many heroes pretending to be gods, yet too high above to notice the mortals burning beneath them. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her gaze tracked the long, glimmering blur of a limousine slithering down the wet streets below. Captain Celebrity. Christopher Skyline. The man who should have been there. The man who was on patrol that night. The man whose name was buried in the incident report. The man whose gala had been more important than her brother's life. A hero in name. A parasite in reality. She would fix that. With a thunderous crack, she vanished, electricity ripping through the air like a banshee's scream. She moved with precision, not like a hero, but a wrathful force of nature. Lightning wrapped around her limbs like armor, her speed warping space as electromagnetic currents bent under her will. She didn't run. She glided. She didn't hunt. She judged. Within seconds she was above the limousine, flying low and silent until, boom. A sonic pulse exploded as her flight turned into a dive, her body a bolt of sentient judgment. She crashed into the back of the limo, her hands like claws, dragging the door open mid-roll. He was there. Laughing. Slurring. Arms slung over the shoulder of a model barely old enough to vote. Of course. Before he could react, her hand snapped forward and clutched his throat. One pulse of electricity and his muscles locked. And then they were airborne. Then there was concrete. Then there was silence. They landed in an alley 2 blocks away. She shoved him into the brick wall, the impact cratering the surface. Dust rained down from above. Captain Celebrity wheezed. Coughed. Choked. Eyes wide. Who the hell, you piece of work? Izumi growled. Her voice was modulated, masked, but her fury vibrated in the pitch. You were supposed to be there. He tried to rise, swinging a sluggish punch. She didn't move. The punch hit her shoulder. It sparked. He screamed. She watched him writhe. And for the first time, she felt nothing. She circled him like a shark around bleeding prey. Christopher Skyline, she said, each word cutting like glass. Accused of abandoning your post. Accused of fleeing your country. Accused of letting a child die. How do you plead? He spat blood. You don't know anything. The next punch caved his cheekbone. Blood splattered the wall. Her gloved hand trembled. She stared at it, watched the crimson glint in the light. She wiped it on her coat without a thought. This world, she said, is rot. And you're the maggots. Captain Celebrity tried to crawl. She placed her foot on his back, a subtle current sizzling through her soul. This job. This title. Hero. It's not for those who want fame. It's for those who will bleed for the weak. Die for the helpless. Fight for the innocent. She pressed down. His spine creaked. So tell me, she whispered, voice like venom, how to plead. He looked up at her, his face broken. His voice ragged. Forget you. And something in her snapped. A surge of electric fury coursed through him. His body jolted violently. He convulsed, spasmed, collapsed. Not dead. Not yet. But he would never walk the same. Never fight the same. Not after this. She knelt beside him. You want to be a hero? She whispered, voice low and shaking. Then act like one. Or I'll come back. And next time I won't stop. She left him there. Shattered. Smoking. Alone. As she vanished into the darkness once more, the storm above rumbled, and lightning cracked across the sky. The night was cold. Not just in temperature, but in silence. A silence clung to the rooftops like ash. Eraserhead moved through the skeletal skyline, his scarf snapping in the wind, his black coat billowing behind him. With every silent landing on the edge of another concrete lip, his tired eyes swept the city, always watching, always calculating, always waiting. He had received the call 11 minutes ago. Another one. The third this week. He had seen blood and bodies, but these weren't just ordinary attacks. They were statements. With a twist of his scarf, he descended toward a side alley lit only by flickering lampposts and ambulance lights. The smell hit first: concrete dust, engine oil, and the faint burn of ozone. Electricity. As he landed softly on the pavement,